If Mom can't remember things clearly anymore, no one will blame us for applying for guardianship. I froze behind the half-closed door, my suitcase still tagged from the flight I'd just canceled to come back for a will. Inside, my son Spencer's voice was calm, like he was talking about taxes, not plotting to take away his mother's right to live. Naomi, his wife, spoke softly but clearly. Attorney Carr said if we file early, she won't be able to pull back the assets. I clenched the keys in my hand, the cold sinking into my chest. The boy who once held my hand through a fever was now whispering an idea to turn his mother into someone powerless. I didn't cry. I just opened my phone, hit record, and shut the suitcase. The flight to Florida was postponed indefinitely. Because tonight, before they file their first form, I'm going to rewrite this whole play, and the victim will no longer be me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Loretta Myers, 65, widowed for 6 years, living alone in a small house on the edge of Madison, Wisconsin. I spent my life in archives at the Dane County Historical Museum. People still call me Mrs. Myers from the stacks, because I remember where every manuscript, every envelope, every signature lives, like each one has its own soul. I'm not rich, but I live neatly, and I've always believed honesty and order keep life running steady. I raised Spencer on that belief that if you work hard and live straight, you never have to lie to anyone. But standing behind that door, hearing him map out how to legitimize stripping his own mother's personhood, I understood. There are things you can preserve your whole life and still never preserve the human heart. I turned the car around. The GPS still showed the route to the airport, but I shut it off and let the road pull me back toward Maplewood, where my house sits under old maples, where everything used to be peaceful to the point of dull. I parked under the same tree, as every year, the spot where Arthur, my husband, liked to wash the car on Saturday mornings. The difference is, this year he's been gone 6 years, and our only son is working to take the rest of me too. I stepped out without locking the door. My footsteps on the stone path sounded dry and hard. From the dining room came a hush of voices, trailing into the study. I pressed against the wall and peered through a sliver of light. Spencer was on speaker, eyes pinned to a pile of papers. A name came through clearly: Rudy Carr, a man's voice, low, professional, distant. First step is to file for a capacity assessment. If there are medical notes, even better. How old is she? 65. Good. With a few behavior notes, we can get temporary guardianship for the son. I felt my blood go cold, each heartbeat like a hammer in my skull. I realized this wasn't a moment of bad judgment. This was a prepared plan, with legal advice and a clear goal: turn me into a senile old woman so they could control the money. I stepped back half a pace and touched the wall to steady myself. The mother in me wanted to walk in and shout, "What are you doing?" But I stopped myself. No, not now. Not without knowing how far they've gone. I chose intentional silence. I moved quietly to the kitchen, opened the oak china cabinet where I'd hidden a secondary safe behind the dish shelves. The key was still in the pocket of an old raincoat. I slid it in, turned it, and heard a tiny click that made my heart skip. Inside was Arthur Myers' original will, the one I've always kept hidden, leaving only a copy for Spencer. Arthur once said, "If I'm not here, don't let anyone sign for you, not even our son." Paper only tells the truth when you hold it yourself. I pulled out the thick envelope and looked at Arthur's familiar handwriting, the same hand he used for notes to me. Part of me wanted to cry. The other part had never been clearer. I slipped the envelope into my bag, along with the keys and the phone that was still recording. As I headed out, I glanced down the hall. Spencer was still on with Rudy Carr, walking and scribbling in a notebook. Naomi stood with arms crossed, eyes cool, like an outsider. I slipped out like a shadow so light the floorboards didn't speak. The door eased shut behind me, the hinge giving a small scrape and ending punctuation to the role of the gentle mother I'd tried to hold. Outside, the late winter Wisconsin wind cut through skin. I got in the car and took a long breath. On the passenger seat was the unopened suitcase clothes, a book, and a ticket to Florida. I turned on the cabin light and stared at today's date on the ticket. I gave a thin smile. "No, Loretta," I told myself. "Your trip isn't to Florida. It starts right here." I started the engine without turning on the radio. The hum in the quiet sounded like a promise. No explanations, no begging, just action. I drove through downtown, holiday lights still dangling off porches, twinkling in the rear view. Madison looked as calm as ever, but for me, everything had changed. I didn't know my first move yet, only that when people think I'm weak, that's when I have to be stronger than ever. I didn't go back to the motel, and I didn't call anyone. I drove straight to the Dane County Historical Museum, where I'd spent over 3 decades. People still call me Mrs. Myers from the archives. There, I learned to read between lines, and that evidence always speaks if you preserve it right. I parked behind the old red brick building, showed my retiree ID to the guard, and borrowed a guest pass. They still remembered me. "Hi, Miss Loretta. Still love the smell of old paper?" I just smiled. In the stacks, paper, wood, and paste glue mixed into a scent that feels like myself. I sat at my old desk, flipped on the lamp, and wrote a plan. 1. Photocopy the original will. 2. Contact a Mater trustworthy attorney, not through Spencer. 3. Review all account changes over the last 6 months. 4. Gather evidence, audio, paperwork, behaviors. 5. Stay silent until everything is sealed tight. I stared at the list and wondered when I started needing a strategy to protect myself from my own child. Next to me sat the old clock. Arthur gave me the hour hand, gliding slow and steady. Wind hissed at the windows, carrying the Wisconsin cold, and I realized I wasn't shaking at all. By the time I left the museum, dusk had laid a deep gold over the city. I drove toward Lake Monona, the water throwing back broken glass light. I parked, opened my phone, and replayed the first recording. Spencer's voice came through, clear and firm, without a stutter. "If Mom can't remember things clearly anymore, no one will blame us for applying for guardianship." I closed my eyes and felt each word prick like pins in my palm. Then I smiled the smile of someone who knows the first piece of evidence is in hand. I said to myself, low and even, "Okay, Spencer. If you want to fight with paperwork, then I'll let the paperwork speak for me." I started the car and checked the mirror. The lights of my house glowed far off, but that light wasn't home anymore. It was the first stage of a fight I never thought I'd have to enter. And I knew when morning comes, the victim won't be me. I sat for a few more minutes, letting the Monona wind slip through the cracked window. It carried a metallic chill, a damp smell, and a faint trace of old paper from the brick building behind me. That smell, the smell of archives, of time, settles me. Maybe only in the world of documents, labels, and chain of custody do I feel whole. I am Loretta Myers, registrar at the Dane County Historical Museum for over 30 years. My job was to guard what others called the past. Letters, wills, maps, journals, fragile things that hold entire lives. At 65, it's bitterly funny that I have to apply that exact workflow to my own life. I took a long breath and carried my bag inside. The basement hallway was still lit by warm, dim tubes, the light skimming cracks on the wall like the grain of memory. I passed the heavy wooden door with the brass plate, archives, staff only, now a little darker. Inside, paste glue and oak welcomed me like an old friend. This space hasn't changed. Orderly, quiet, honest. No pretending here. No son talking guardianship, no young wife calculating inheritance, just paper, ink, and proof. I went to the back table by the cabinet, the place I'd spent thousands of hours accessioning donations. My hand rested on the wood, still smooth, still warm like skin. I opened my bag and took out the envelope with Arthur's original will. The instant the paper hit the lamp's glow, I felt like he was here, standing behind me, watching me work just like he used to. I opened the envelope carefully, pulled out each sheet, and put them in numbered order. On top sat the notes Arthur once wrote by hand, which I typed up for him in 2016. He told me, "We need to be clear, Loretta. Black and white is the only thing that protects people when feelings change." I read that line again, my chest tight. Under executor, my name was bold, black, straight. Arthur even underlined it in red, like he wanted to make sure no one, not even his son, could miss it. Along the margin of the last page was a slanted note in his hand, the ink slightly smudged. "Do not grant full authority to our son without an independent evaluation. No matter what, Loretta must be the final approval." I put my fingers on it, a slight tremor in my tips. Had he seen this coming years ago? Maybe Arthur understood Spencer better than I did. And I, the mother who covered for him and went soft, was the last to see. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened my notebook and wrote, "Copy the entire will. Find a new, independent lawyer. Audit all account changes in the last 6 months. No confrontation, only collection. Every document needs a timestamp and storage location." I set the pen down and drew a long breath. In this archive, I wasn't a betrayed mother anymore. I was a custodian of evidence, like I've always been. I know how to handle truth: number, copy, store, seal. A document only has value if it's preserved correctly, just like justice only exists when proven by evidence, not by words. I powered up the old scanner, squared each page, and listened to its soft grind. I labeled each file: Arthur Will Original, PDF, Scan by Loretta, timestamp, 8:47 p.m. I created a new folder on my external drive. Evidence Log 1. In the description I typed, "First verified document, original last will and testament of Arthur Myers. Executor, Loretta Myers. Valid until revoked." At the bottom, I added, "Evidence duplicated by the direct party. No third party." These steps are muscle memory now. Every move exact, like handling a priceless donation. I could hear my old professor in my head. Chain of custody is the lifeline of evidence. One slip, and the truth collapses. I can't slip. Not this time. When the screen flashed "Scan complete," I plugged in a USB and made another copy titled "Personal Backup." Then I used my phone to take photos of the process from the table corner to the wall clock to create secondary proof of time and place. For each photo I added, "Proof of chain, Loretta Myers, Dane County Historical Museum, December 12th, 8:53 p.m. For the first time in months, my heartbeat felt steady and justified. I looked around. Shelf after shelf to the ceiling, boxes labeled by year and topic, all familiar. I remembered hundreds of late nights here, debating whether to repair a torn letter or leave time's mark. We used to say the truth doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to exist. That's what I'm doing now, preserving a truth my own son is trying to bend. I checked the clock. After 9. Security would lock up soon. I put the original into a moisture-proof sleeve, sealed it, and slid it into my bag. I opened my phone and wrote a new note. December 12th, first step done. Original evidence duplicated. No notifications sent. I read it back and locked the screen. At the door, I turned for one last look at the dark wood frame. I remembered my first day. Arthur brought a lunchbox and said, "You picked right, no one protects the past like you." Back then, I thought he meant old letters or oil paintings. I didn't know that 30 years later, I'd be protecting my own past from the hands of the person I brought into this world. I switched off the lights and stepped into the hall. My heels clicked, calm and even. At the end, the glass showed a small woman with a straight back, gray hair, and bright eyes. Maybe getting older isn't about getting weaker, it's about being less afraid. Cold air hit when I pushed outside, but I didn't lift my collar. The wind cleared my head. On the steps, I looked down at my car under the maple, the streetlight honeying the hood. I realized I no longer felt old, small, or threatened. I had a plan, a path. Most of all, I had a truth under proper custody, right process, right rules, exactly as a true registrar would do. I went down, opened the car, set the bag carefully, and started the engine. In the rear view, the brick building shrank to a warm pin of light in the Wisconsin mist. I spoke softly to myself, or maybe to Arthur. Don't worry. I still remember the workflow. And I drove toward the lights ahead where the next step was waiting. On the way home, I turned on the heat and still felt cold. Not from Madison's night wind or the first flakes tapping the glass, but from the truth forming in my mind, the truth I should have seen long ago. When you're betrayed, the first shock isn't the words, it's realizing all the warning signs were always there, and you chose to look away. I remembered the months after Arthur died. Spencer had just been promoted. Naomi was opening a home goods shop. They visited often, bringing food, flowers, and perfectly timed care. I thought it was love. Looking back now, each gesture was a calculated test. The first odd thing was Spencer switching accountants on his own. Our old guy, Mr. Patterson, had handled the family more than 2 decades. One afternoon, Spencer showed up with a polite smile, laid a packet on the table, and said gently, "Mom, I think Mr. Patterson's too old, keeps making mistakes. I know a younger firm that's quick. Just sign here, it's only changing the billing address." I signed, didn't read closely. I even joked, "You really look out for me." I didn't know that signature opened the door for Spencer to control the joint accounts. After that, all tax notices and bank statements went to an inbox Spencer set up for Mom. I didn't push back. I was tired, sorting Arthur's things, and didn't have the stomach for cold figures. Then one day, I found the property taxes were on auto pay. I'd never authorized it, but the bill said auto pay, initiated by authorized party. When I called the office, the clerk asked, "Mrs. Myers, that's your son, right?" He sent a notarized authorization. "We thought you knew." I didn't remember signing anything. Instead of digging in, I gave a weak laugh. I must have forgotten. I told myself Spencer just wanted to help. Now I see each explanation like shards of mirror reflecting the whole plan. About 6 months later, Naomi started nudging me toward a memory support service. Honey in her voice. "You know, at your age, everyone needs little reminders. We just want you comfortable, not having to remember too much." They sent a young woman who called herself an elder care coordinator. She logged everything, meds, appointments, even my walk times. I felt smothered, but out of politeness, I let her do it. I learned later every note fed straight to Spencer, a tidy behavior observation report. Naomi was slicker. She installed a pill reminder app on my phone to help you not forget. Soon, I noticed the account was tied to her email, and she held the password. When I asked, she laughed. "Don't worry, I remember better than you." I laughed too, that easy laugh of someone who thinks she's still in control. I didn't know those pill boxes would later be used to prove signs of forgetfulness. One fall evening last year, Spencer brought a glossy brochure for a senior community. He set it down, voice so gentle it sounded fake. "Take a look, Mom. They have gardens, a reading room, even yoga. We think you might be happier with friends your age." I remember staying quiet. The pictures showed smiling seniors in a green lawn, honeyed sunshine. Their eyes were empty. I didn't like it. Spencer mistook my silence for agreement. I flipped pages, smelled the heavy ink, and shut it. Back then, I still believed it was just overdone concern. But the last dinner before my flight, the night I thought was ordinary, was the clearest sign. Naomi cooked wine-braised ham. Spencer queued up jazz, like a warm family night. Only the conversation bent strange. "Do you remember what day it is?" Naomi asked lightly. "Thursday, if I'm not wrong." "Oh no, it's Tuesday." Spencer chuckled. "Mom, you mix it up a lot lately." I laughed along, but it felt like a door closing. Now I know they were testing recording my reactions, every glance and answer, so weeks later they could use it as evidence. I wasn't angry then, just tired. Tired from the years alone, from life losing its rhythm. Arthur gone, I slowed down, and they the young equated slower with incapable. I thought, let the kids take care of me. It's fine. Now, under the streetlights in the mirror, I see how each small act locked into the next like links in a chain meant to hold me. When I got home, I flipped on the kitchen light and pulled out the brown leather notebook Arthur gave me when I retired. I set the pen down and wrote, as if drafting an incident report, March Spencer changed the accountant and created an email to receive the bills himself. May property tax autopay showed up without my signature. June Naomi installed a medication reminder app and kept the password. August Spencer introduced a senior living center. October. At dinner, they tried to mislead me about the day of the week. I added the time, place, people involved, how they spoke, even the tone. I had made hundreds of reports like that throughout my career. Every time an artifact was moved or a document was damaged, I wrote a detailed description. Now, I was building a file on the erosion of trust. I wrote, until near midnight, the desk lamp washing over pages packed with words. My hand ached, but my mind felt strangely clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't writing a journal, I was writing evidence. When I closed the notebook, I looked at the last line. This isn't support. This is a scripted setup for a diminished capacity proceeding. I read the words again. They hurt, but they were accurate. Spencer was no longer just a clumsy son trying to control his mother. He was coached, lawyered up, planned. Naomi was no longer a deft daughter-in-law. She was a witness, a data collector. I leaned back in the chair, listening to the clock tick. In the dim light, the house looked different, not a refuge anymore, but a silent scene. I knew I needed what an archivist always has, a model of action. No emotion, only procedure, no haste, only recording and verification. I pulled a blank sheet from the drawer and set it in the old typewriter, the one Arthur used to write me love. Letters. The keys struck slowly, each letter appearing on the page. Protection, Plan L. Myers. Under that, I bullet-pointed the next steps. Collect all electronic data. Contact the tax office again to confirm authorizations. Create time-stamped copies of every document. No direct confrontation. Don't say anything that could be recorded and used. I finished typing, pulled the page out, folded it in thirds, and slipped it into a sealed envelope. On the front, I handwrote, First sealing, December 13th. When I placed the envelope in the safe, a calm spread through my chest. I was no longer the mother crying behind a door. I was myself again, an archivist who knows how to preserve the truth, even when the truth hurts. Outside, the wind hissed through the window seams. I stood, turned off the lights, and left only the small lamp in the corner, the pale yellow glow reflecting off our old wedding photo of Arthur and me. He was smiling, and I was tilting my head down, holding a bouquet of white lilies. I whispered, "Do you see, love? In the end, I'm still doing my job, only this time. The subject under preservation is my own life." I latched the window and drew the curtains. In that small house, there were no more tears, only the soft rustle of paper, the sound of a woman beginning her counterattack, one line, one piece of evidence at a time. I never thought I'd see the day I had to fake confusion. I've spent my life with things that demand precision down to the number and the comma. And yet now, I had to practice forgetting intentionally making mistakes, letting things get messy to convince my own son that his mother was slipping into the dim edges of old age. The next morning, I drove to a small electronics shop on the corner of State Street. The young clerk looked at me, polite but a little unsure when he heard my question. "Do you have a recorder that's really small and doesn't beep when it starts?" He handed me a mini recorder no bigger than a thumb, matte black with a cool metal shell. "This one runs about 4 hours, and the audio's pretty clear. It's easy, just press and hold for 1 second. I nodded, paid cash, and didn't leave any membership info. Walking out, I felt like there was a second heart in my coat pocket, small, silent, always listening. I tested it in the car, pressed and held, saw the red light blink once and disappear. Perfect. No beep, no extra light, only silence, exactly what I needed. The next morning, I started staging forgetfulness. I left the kettle lid popped just enough for steam to fog the stovetop. I set an unopened envelope in the middle of the dining table, next to a half-finished crossword with a few wrong entries, a capless pen rolling on the edge. I even forgot to turn on the heat so the house held a faint chill, the kind that makes anyone walking in think, an absent-minded old lady forgot the thermostat. I opened the curtains to let winter light flood in bright enough for my cabinet camera to catch everything. The house now looked exactly the way they wanted to imagine me, a solitary mother starting to slip. Before leaving the kitchen, I tucked the mini recorder into a seam of my gray wool cardigan, right where an old stitch once was. A slight tilt, and the mic pointed outward. I tried standing, sitting, bending, moving, no sound. Good. Then I left the door unlocked, just as Spencer often scolded me for. "Mom, you forget to lock the door all the time. It's dangerous." This time I'd forget again with a very clear reason. At exactly 10:20, Spencer's car pulled up. I sat at the dining table, wrapped in a thick robe, hair loosely pinned, glasses slipping on my nose. The TV played a vintage show at a whisper. The door opened. "Mom?" His voice was gentle, a little forced. "In the kitchen, honey," I answered, slow and slightly hoarse, just natural enough. It came in with a brown paper bag, the smell of hot soup filling the room. "I brought you chicken soup. Naomi made it. Have you eaten?" "Not yet. I forgot. I looked out the window." He smiled. I recognized that look, half pity, half assessment. Spencer observes the way a man evaluates a product. I let him see every sign he needed, slow, distracted, a little muddled. He set the bag down, poured the soup into a bowl. I reached across the table on purpose and dropped a spoon. Metal hit tile with a crack. I gave a small laugh, shook my head. "See? I'm clumsy. It's okay, Mom. That's why I stopped by," he said, smiling. When we sat, he started exactly as I expected. "How have you been sleeping, Mom?" "Okay. Some mornings I wake up early and then forget what I meant to do," I said, avoiding his eyes. He nodded, eyes flicking to his watch. "Do you remember the insurance letter I sent last week? The one marked policy renewal?" Maybe I put it somewhere," I said, tilting my head and looking around. "Here," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket like a magic trick. "Found it on the table. I can read it to you." "Just a small formality," I smiled. Just a small formality was exactly the signal I'd been waiting for. "Thank you. My eyes aren't great. The print is tiny," he read. Each sentence I captured in my mind like a scanner. He read the parts about adding a co-manager of assets and authorizing representation on behalf of the owner upon signs of cognitive decline. His tone was even, as if it were obvious. When he stopped, I asked softly, feigning hesitation, "So, you're saying I'm about to be not clear-minded enough?" "No, Mom, I just want to be prepared. At this age, everyone should be. Naomi and I only want what's best for you." His voice was as soft as a winter blanket, but each word hit colder than ice. I glanced toward the window where snow drifted past the porch. I murmured, almost to myself, "What day is it again?" Spencer didn't miss a beat. "Wednesday, Mom." "Oh, I thought it was Friday," I said with a shy smile, pretending to forget. "It's okay," he replied. "That's why I've been thinking about a place where you'd be looked after more carefully." Looked after more carefully, it sounded like love and a verdict at once. He started describing a facility with a therapy garden, music, cooking classes, senior chats. His voice was steady, almost as if he were reading from a brochure. I nodded, seeming absent. I dropped the spoon again. Spencer bent to pick it up, his voice light as air. "See? You need help. They have staff there around the clock." I looked at my son, the gentle smile, the tender manner. Underneath it, I saw the trained calculus. They weren't waiting for their mother to grow old, they were building the proof to make her old faster. After lunch, Spencer tidied the dishes. Like a model son, "I'm leaving more soup in the fridge. Eat it over the next couple days." I nodded, pretending to be moved, touched his hand, and said softly, "I'm grateful, sweetheart. You just rest. I'll handle everything." I met his eyes, calm. No anger, no blame. I knew I had captured the entire performance. When the door clicked shut, I sat still, listening to the car pull away. Only when the quiet settled did I stand, slip the tiny recorder from my cardigan, and watch the light blink 3 times, recording complete. I plugged it into the laptop, downloaded the file, replayed a few parts. His voice rang clear, word for word. "Wednesday, Mom. They have staff there around the clock." I saved the file as lunch proposal to relocate, MP3. Next, I opened the encryption app software Marisol had set up for me back in my museum days. I created a new folder. Evidence. Log. 2. Uploaded the audio with this note. Speaker. Spencer Hale. Location. Private residence. Madison, Wisconsin. Time. 12:14 p.m. December 14th. Content. Proposal to relocate and confirmation of memory decline indicators. Then I set a password only I would know, a string tied to the one date no one could guess. The day Arthur proposed. I sat quietly for a while, watching the thin sun angle through the window, lighting the ring left by the hot soup bowl. Everything looked peaceful, but inside this house I knew I'd activated the chain of custody work I'd mastered my whole life, now used to protect me. I spoke to no one but myself, just loud enough to hear, "You want to test me, Spencer? I've archived thousands of documents in my life. Did you think I'd forget how to store one more?" Outside, the snow kept falling. I stood, poured the remaining soup down the drain, steam fogging the glass. Then I wiped every drop away, leaving nothing but calm. When I finished, I switched off the kitchen light, turned, and smiled the smile of a mother who had just completed the first move in a game her son didn't know he was playing. I spent the whole evening staring at audio files, notes, and the to-do list spread across the kitchen table. The warm lamp made the room look like a small courtroom, except the judge, witness, and defendant were all the people I loved most. I knew I couldn't fight alone. I needed someone outside, someone who knew the law better than I did and wouldn't let feelings blur the lines. The name came to me immediately: Marisol Kane. Marisol had been outside counsel for the museum where I worked for over 3 decades. She specialized in contested gifts, cases where old paperwork could shift millions of dollars. I remembered her clearly tall black hair, a stern gaze with a thread of warmth. We'd teamed up on a tangled case in 2009, and she taught me to read legal clauses like sheet music: keep the tempo, hear the subtext, and don't let anyone play a wrong note. I picked up the phone, found her number in my yellowed notebook. I called, but only got voicemail. "You've reached Marisol Kane, Kane and Torres Law." Please leave a message. I inhaled and kept my voice even. Hi, Marisol. This is Loretta Myers. I need to speak with you private and urgent. Not museum-related, but it concerns a will. I know you'll understand. Please call me back. I hung up and sat still. In under 15 minutes, the phone buzzed. Her voice was low and steady. Loretta, are you okay? You sound not quite yourself. I'm okay, but I need to meet. As soon as possible. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., I'll come to your house. I exhaled. One short answer, and I knew she understood and believed me. The next day, I woke early, made coffee, and set the table. I didn't want the house too tidy. I left a few papers unfolded, a few notebooks open as if it were a casual catch-up, not a strategy session to protect my life. At 10 to 3, a black sedan stopped at the curb. Marisol got out, brisk stride, charcoal wool coat, briefcase in hand. Her eyes were the same cool on the surface, warm underneath. Miss Loretta, she said with a small smile. Long time. Yes, I answered, opening the door. Last time might have been the Egyptian gallery opening. And now it seems you're the artifact that needs protecting. The half-joke made me laugh. We sat at the dining table. I didn't ramble, just slid the mini recorder and Arthur's original will across to her. Marisol opened her tablet, plugged in earphones, and listened to the entire recording. I stared out the window while my son's voice played warm, slow, each word sweet to the point of false. When the file ended, she took off the earphones and folded her hands. I understand, she said. You have audio evidence and the original will. That gives us leverage. I don't want to fight, Marisol. I just want to keep my autonomy. And that's exactly what we'll do. She pulled blank forms, a pen, a seal from her case, and spoke like she was reading orders. First, revoke Spencer's power of attorney. I'll draft it now. Then we'll update the will, naming you as sole executor. Finally, we'll notify the Wisconsin registry about the changes. I nodded, not interrupting. Every word was a rung in the ladder. I needed to climb out of the hole Spencer dug. Marisol opened her laptop. Fingers quick, as she explained. I'll create a dedicated archive on your machine, named Loretta Legal Private. In it, I'll set up versioning and logs. Every edit will have a timestamp, editor, and storage location. No one can alter anything without leaving a trail. I smiled, like a chain of custody in the museum. Exactly. I learned that from you, she said, half teasing. She finished a form and slid it to me. Revocation of POA for Spencer Hale. I read each line carefully. I, Loretta Myers, of sound mind, hereby revoke all legal representative authority previously granted to Spencer Hale, effective today. Below was the signature line and notary, Marisol Kane. I took the pen. The tip trembled, but I signed decisively. Marisol flipped the seal and stamped one crisp click. A round red mark bloomed on the page, like the ancient seals I once restored. Done, she said. From now on, Spencer has no authority over your property or medical decisions. I sat quiet a moment, feeling an invisible cord loosen from my neck. I only wondered, can a small stamp stop a storm? Do you think that click was fair to Loretta? I'd truly like to hear your perspective in the comments below. Marisol opened her notebook and continued. We need a 3-layer defense. 3? Legal, medical, financial. She held up 3 fingers. 1. Legal, revoke and reestablish all powers of attorney. Update the will. 2. Medical. Obtain an independent letter of cognitive capacity. 3. Financial, reconcile every account. Ensure documentation for each transaction. With all 3, she said, they can't touch you, not with a single signature. I nodded. Like 3 barriers around a priceless artifact. Exactly. You always catch on fast. She went on, I also want you to set up dual backups, one in encrypted cloud, one on a secure USB. This USB will be sealed and lodged in a bank safe deposit box. I'll help you open a dedicated account. No one else can access it. She handed me a small silver USB engraved K and T. Don't keep it here. Spencer can show up anytime. The metal was cold in my palm. In that moment, for the first time, I wasn't afraid. At 4:30, Marisol closed her laptop and poured more tea. Looking over the rim of her cup, her voice softened. Loretta, from now on, every communication, email, text, paper, needs timestamps and copies. Don't say anything off the record, okay? Understood. I used to do that with donor artifacts. Now I'll apply it to my son. We both laughed, but it only covered a deep sadness. Marisol knew it too. To survive, I had to be an observer, not a mother. Before leaving, she wrote a few final lines, tore the page out, and handed it to me. Next Monday, 10 a.m., bank reconciliation. Bring the will, the POA revocation, and ID. I folded the slip into my wallet. She stood, pulled on her coat. I'll draft the letter to the property registry. They'll have it tomorrow. Stay steady. Everything is moving the right way. Thank you, Marisol. Thank you for trusting me. Not everyone can stand up when the attack comes from family. I watched her go, black hair over her shoulders, stride decisive. When her car turned off the street, the headlights swept the snow and left a streak of light that vanished. The house fell quiet again. I sat and looked at the still wet red seal, small ink, strong enough to block a whole scheme. I wrote one more line in the corner. Second sealing, December 15th. I opened my laptop, created a folder named Legal Revocation, and saved all the scans. In the notes, I typed, POA revocation for Spencer Hale, verified by attorney Marisol Kane. Chain of custody. Intact. Archivist habit. I don't skip details, even the way I annotate. When I finished, I plugged in the USB, copied everything, slipped it into a silver envelope, and heat-sealed it. On the front I wrote, Backup 01 Stored Evidence, signed Loretta M. The porch light faded. I brewed chamomile tea and watched the window. Snow covered the fence. The sunset washed the block in pale gold, peaceful to the point of absurd. No one knew that in this small house a quiet war was beginning, and the one holding the weapon was a 65-year-old widow, hands unsteady but mind sharp as a blade. I sipped, letting the heat touch my lips. On the table sat Arthur's original will beside the stamped POA revocation. I snapped a photo and whispered, almost under my breath, Arthur, you'd be proud. This time I won't let anyone sign for me. Outside, the wind scraped the bare maples. Inside, I felt warm, the warmth of a woman who stopped trying to be the good mother and started being the keeper of her own keys. 3 days after meeting Marisol, I woke earlier than usual. The snow lay thicker, whitening the neighbors' roofs and the narrow path to the garage. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching morning light bounce off a thin sheet of ice. The heaviness in me was gone. Each plan was stacking neatly, like the archive boxes I used to shelve at the museum. That morning, I called Dr. Hartley Quinn's clinic. He's been my family doctor for nearly 10 years. He treated Arthur in his final years, a man of few words, careful, with a remarkable memory. I kept it brief. Dr. Quinn, I'd like to schedule a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. Reason, for my personal records. He was a now. Bit surprised but didn't pry. This Friday, 10 a.m. Do you need me to send a template beforehand? No need. I'm familiar with the process. I heard him chuckle softly over the phone. Still as meticulous as ever. All right, Loretta, I'll have the report ready. And I'll bring in 2 witnesses to sign. When I hung up, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. Not because the fear was gone, but because everything was starting to fall into order, as if I were shelving my own life in an archive. I arrived 10 minutes early for the appointment. The small clinic sat on a quiet street next to a flower shop. Inside, the smell of disinfectant mingled with coffee from the automatic machine at the front desk. I filled out the forms, leaving nothing blank. When I stepped into the room, Dr. Quinn looked up from a file and smiled kindly. "I'm guessing Spencer doesn't know about this?" "No," I said. "And I'd like to keep it that way." He nodded immediately, understanding. No further explanation needed. The evaluation lasted nearly an hour and a half. He asked me to recite numbers backward, describe shapes, remember lists of random words, recount recent events. I answered slowly, precisely, without rushing. He moved on to logic tasks and spatial questions. When he asked me to draw a floor plan of my house, I sketched the exact position of each room, window, and even where the afternoon sun falls across the kitchen. Dr. Quinn smiled, nodding along. "If anyone says you're impaired, I want to know what they're basing it on." At the end, he signed the evaluation, stamped it, then brought in 2 witnesses from outside the head nurse and the medical secretary. They read the entire conclusion before signing. No evidence of memory loss, disorientation, or diminished capacity. Assessment: alert, full cognition, judgment, and recall stable and appropriate for age. He clipped the papers together and handed them to me. "You should keep this safe. This is your first wall, Loretta." I knew what he meant. The first wall was legal proof of capacity. This would block any temporary guardianship filing Spencer might try. Back home, I hung my coat on the hook and set the document bag on the table. Afternoon light slanted through the window and reflected off the wooden surface where I'd already laid out files, recordings, the POA revocation, and the original will. I opened a cabinet and pulled out 2 old document boxes, the kind I used at the museum, and started the familiar work, sorting and indexing. I gathered all receipts, printed emails, bank statements, and my handwritten notes, each one a piece of evidence of consistent conduct. A person losing her mind couldn't store, annotate, and systematize dozens of documents with this kind of logic. I split them into 3 groups: legal, POA, will, notarized papers, letters of confirmation from Marisol, medical, records from Dr. Quinn, prescriptions, test results, the cognitive assessment, personal, letters, receipts, notebooks, work calendars, notes on spending and transactions. I labeled each set with colored tabs: red, blue, yellow. Just like I used to classify wartime artifacts, clear, verifiable, and impossible to scramble. At dusk, I powered up the scanner. Its familiar startup hum thumped steadily like a heartbeat. I scanned everything, assigning each file its own document code and timestamp in date order. 2020 FIV-12-18 MED QN Assessment PDF. 2020 FIV-12-18 Leg POA Revocation PDF. 2025 -12-18 PRS Receipts Batch 1 PDF. I created a descriptive guide with notes, a finding aid for my own life. The scope read, "Archival Purpose," to demonstrate the subject Loretta Myers's clarity, logic, and autonomous behavior. When I finished, the screen listed nearly 70 files. I sat and looked at the tidy lines of text, each one a piece of evidence for the fact of my existence, not just as a mother, but as a fully competent legal person. I moved everything into the Loretta Legal Private folder Marisol helped me set up. Then I downloaded Dr. Quinn's digital certificate and attached it to the assessment. The system displayed, "Digital signature verified. Dr. Hartley, Quinn, MD." I smiled. The monitor's glow reflected off my glasses, glinting like metal on a red seal. Next, I emailed Marisol. Simple subject line. Subject: cognitive evaluation completed attachment. Certified assessment. PDF. Message. Attached. Cognitive exam report. Certified with witnesses. Backed up in private folder. Proceeding with financial reconciliation. LM. After sending, I added a line to my journal. December 18th completed the second defense layer, medical. That evening, I tidied the desk. The file set sat neatly in clear plastic boxes. I put a large label on the outside. Archive, Loretta Myers, evidence of capacity. On the lid, I added with a great Myers. Marker: each file is a brick in the wall against the image of the forgetful mother. I read it aloud. It sounded like a vow. Around 8, Marisol texted, "Received. Excellent, Loretta." I've never had a client archive her own case this thoroughly. I replied, "Just habit from the job. Keep that habit. One day, it'll be what saves you." I set the phone down and poured myself a small glass of wine, the kind Arthur liked in winter. The amber color shone clear. I lifted it and spoke into the quiet. "This one's for you, Arthur. You always said I had a camera for a memory. Turns out that memory is what's keeping me from being erased." After cleaning up, I walked to the door to check the lock out of old habit. This time, my hand stopped halfway. I smiled and let it fall. No need to check anymore. I turned off the living room lights and left the small desk lamp on. Its warm glow fell across the clear file boxes like the lights in an old exhibit case where artifacts sit safe behind thick glass. Only now, the artifact I was preserving wasn't clay or parchment, it was my own lucidity. I walked down the hall and brushed a finger across our wedding photo. In it, Arthur was smiling, eyes full of trust as he looked at me. "Don't worry," I whispered. "No one gets to rewrite my story anymore." That night, I slept straight through. No hallway light, no waking to check the lock or the clock. Sleep came soft as an instrumental, and in my dream I sat in a vast archive, boxes lined up around me, each one a guarded memory, each paper a brick in the wall of freedom. After Marisol's congratulatory message that I now had 3 perfect layers of defense, I didn't celebrate. On the contrary, I knew the most dangerous phase is when the other side senses they're losing control. I had a feeling Spencer wouldn't wait long to test me. The next morning, I was up early. Madison's sky was a muted gray, and a chill seeped through the window frames. I pulled a wooden chair onto the front porch, Spencer's usual spot to take calls when he visited. He never discussed private matters inside, always wanting to keep things quiet for Mom. As it turned out, that habit would be the perfect weak point. I opened Arthur's old toolbox and took out a screwdriver, electrical tape, and a mini microphone Marisol had included in the evidence kit. The mic was smaller than a shirt button and could connect to my phone via Bluetooth. I tucked it under the red geranium pot, right at the porch rail where Spencer likes to lean his elbow when he calls. At that angle, the mic was hidden and perfectly placed for clear sound. I checked the signal. The light flashed blue once and went dark. The test came through my earbud. Sparrows, wind over the porch, and even my heartbeat. I smiled. Perfect. I staged a new set of forgetful signs, just enough to lower Spencer's guard, not enough to raise suspicion. On the kitchen table, I left the sugar jar lid open. On the shelf, a notebook tilted with a few dog-eared pages. I didn't turn on the heat, even though it was only in the mid-30s. To outsiders, those details are symptoms, but to me, they're visual traps. At 10 a.m., Spencer arrived, just as I expected. He didn't knock. He eased the door open and called out, "Mom, I'm coming in." I sat at the dining table in a thick sweater, steam curling from my tea. "Oh, Spencer, you're early." "I had an errand nearby and stopped in. Brought you some materials." I glanced at the brown leather folder he placed on the table. The label read, Silver Pines Care Residence Admissions Info. Just reading it chilled me. He sat across from me, voice calm, like we were discussing summer plans. Mom, we just want you to be safe. Staff there is on duty 24 hours. Private rooms, a therapy garden, even an art class. I feigned hesitation. Sounds nice, I guess. But I'm fine, Spencer. I know, it's just to be prepared. You know you've been a bit forgetful lately. He smiled lightly, voice like a breeze. I knew behind each prepared was a fully drafted guardianship plan. I nodded, picked up the brochure, and acted confused. While I read, he stood, took out his phone, and stepped onto the porch right on cue. I stayed calm, sipped my tea, and opened the recorder app on my phone. The porch mic was already live. The door clicked softly. Then Spencer's voice carried from the porch, each word crisp. Yes, Rudy, I brought the materials to my mom. Yeah, I think she's slipping. Just look at how she leaves stuff everywhere. A pause. Right, file the urgent evaluation. If we move fast, we could get a temporary order next week. Each urgent evaluation sliced like a blade. He dropped his voice, strategy mode. Just cite Wisconsin Statute 742.2, the temporary diminished capacity provision. I'll provide observational evidence. She keeps forgetting the neighbor's name. Missing appointments, that's enough. No need for another exam, just record it. I closed my eyes. My heart beat steady but deep. Every word, capacity, temporary guardianship, observational evidence, scraped like metal on glass. The mic had all of it. He chuckled softly. Good, Rudy, I trust you. Get the file ready. I'll sign before it goes out. The door opened. Spencer walked back in just as I was still turning the brochure pages. Who was that, honey? I asked casually. Oh, just Rudy, a colleague. Don't worry, he's good. Sounded important. No, Mom, just some routine paperwork. He smiled, packed up the folder, and kissed my forehead. Rest, okay? I'll call you later. The door closed. I heard the engine start and fade. Only quiet remained. I took a long breath and stepped onto the porch. The tiny mic sat snug, behind the geranium pot. I disconnected it, lifted it out, and wiped it with a cloth. Small as it was, it had just captured a conversation worth my entire life. I plugged it into the laptop and downloaded the audio. 17+ minutes, clear enough to hear snow crunch under Spencer's shoes. I replayed it, marked sections, and noted timestamps and keywords. Capacity, 0 hours, 4 minutes, and 11 seconds. Temporary guardianship, 0 hours, 5 minutes, and 27 seconds. Observational evidence, 0006. 43, I saved it as patio call Spencer Rudy Carr, MP3. Then I copied it to the silver USB and uploaded an encrypted version to the cloud around 7 p.m. Marisol arrived with her laptop and a thick file bag. I got your message. Looks like he just handed us evidence against himself. I nodded. The mic caught everything. She opened the laptop and sampled a few clips. Her face stayed composed, but her eyes flashed. Perfect. This is the missing piece. We don't need to speak now. Let the records speak. We sat under the warm light. Marisol extracted the file and cross-checked each line with the brochure Spencer brought. She pointed to the fine print under pre-admission evaluation. Capacity assessment may be requested by a temporary guardian. She said quietly, he wasn't just trying to place you in a facility. He was positioning himself as the legal guardian, with full access to your assets and medical records. I listened, silent. In my mind, I saw Spencer on the porch, voice steady, discussing his mother like an administrative case. Marisol pulled a thick, tabbed packet from her bag, split into 4 color-coded sections. This is the counterfile. I'm submitting it in person tomorrow with a signed receipt. I reviewed it carefully. 1. POA revocation stamped December 15th. 2. Updated will naming me sole executor, notarized. 3. Dr. Quinn's medical certification original, with 2 witnesses. 4. Notice invalidating all prior documents, including anything Spencer has filed. She said, I'll deliver it directly to Rudy Carr's office and require his signed acknowledgement. From that moment, any further action on their part will be considered unlawful interference. I nodded, feeling my shoulders lighten. Marisol, if I didn't have you. If you didn't have me, you'd still manage, she cut in, smiling. I'm just helping you speak the right language. The backbone is yours. We listened to the recording one more time. Spencer's last line rang clear. Get the file ready. I'll sign before it goes out. Marisol hit pause and said, We'll make that the opening line of our response. Her typing was so fast I could barely keep up. The keys clicked steadily, with wind hissing outside. I watched her hands confident, precise, not a single wasted motion. By close to 10, everything was ready. Marisol sealed the packet in a thick envelope and wrote in bold red, Deliver by hand, Kane and Torres. Law firm. Attention. Rudy Carr. She stood and put on her coat. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'll stand in front of him. And I want to see his face when he realizes it was all recorded. I don't need to hear what he says, I answered. I just need him to know I'm still clear. She smiled. You're more than clear, Loretta. You just built a fortress out of paper and there isn't a wall Spencer can climb. The door shut behind her. I watched the car lights fade into the night. The house went quiet again, leaving only the wind scraping across the porch where that tiny mic had been. I turned off the lights and sat alone. The Silver Pines Care residence brochure still lay on the table, elderly faces smiling stiffly in printed sunshine. I drew a line through the words, Feels like home. Home? I muttered. No, Spencer. My real home is here, and you just let it speak for me. I saved one last copy of the audio, attached it to the black. Patio, call, final file, and set a new password. Then I shut down the computer and looked around the warm, bright room, feeling as if I'd just closed the door on a case. I didn't need to shout or agonize. I let the file speak. And in the world of law and evidence, that's a voice no one can dismiss. 2 days after Marisol filed our response, I woke to a different kind of morning, not because the snow had thinned, but because the house was so quiet I could hear the wall clock counting each beat. It felt like the air after a storm, when you can still smell the electricity. Everything stands still, but you know something is shifting far away. Around 9 a.m., the landline rang. The caller ID read, Marisol Kane. Her voice was low, a little hoarse from lack of sleep. Loretta, good news. Rudy Carr called me this morning, and he withdrew. I froze, half believing. Withdrew? You mean he no longer represents Spencer, he said word for word. I'm stepping away from this matter for personal and ethical reasons. I stayed silent a moment, listening to Marisol shuffle papers. That's not all, she said. He sent me an overnight envelope. Inside is a complete copy of everything Spencer's been building for 6 months, draft guardianship petitions, email exchanges, even a template for neighbor observation statements. I'm on my way to bring it to you. When Marisol arrived, I made hot coffee and set out 2 mugs. She didn't smile as usual. She laid the envelope down, eyes turning serious. This isn't just evidence, Loretta. It's a map of your son's last 6 months. I opened it. The familiar smell of paper and toner rose up. I've handled thousands of historical documents, but no sheet has ever felt this cold. The first page was Spencer's email to Carr. I'm concerned my mother is showing cognitive issues. She forgets bills and mixes up the neighbor's name. I think we need an independent medical assessment to protect the family assets. I stared at, to protect the family assets, polished, polite, and perfectly ruthless. Next was the draft petition. Under supporting evidence, Spencer listed repetitive behavior, asking the same question in a day, negligence indicators, leaving the door unlocked, forgetting a boiling kettle. Neighbor concerns, Mrs. Helen Briggs reportedly saw Loretta wandering around the yard. I lifted a corner of my mouth. Helen Briggs? The 82-year-old who slipped on my front steps and whom I bandaged before calling an ambulance. Now she was a witness. Marisol flipped further. Look at this part. It was an internal memo from Carr to Spencer suggesting a soft strategy, create a sympathetic image, use the wife, Naomi, as a bridge. Keep every conversation centered on safety, caring for Mom, remembering how healthy she used to be. Introduce the concept of long-term care gradually. Avoid the crass term guardianship until the final step. It felt like the room was being slowly drained of air. Those words, I had heard them already. They were Naomi's lines at dinners and quiet afternoons by my side, her voice gentle. Mom, we just want you safe. Silver Pines has light yoga, a doctor on nights. You won't have to worry about anything. Every phrase, every cadence exactly as drafted here. I looked down at the end where Carr had underlined, language must be gentle and familiar, avoiding confrontation. Gradually steer toward the capacity evaluation. I set the paper down, feeling my throat tighten. Marisol, do you see it? Even the lines that sound caring are a script. I see it, she said, her voice cold as steel. And Carr, the man who wrote that script, has just taken himself out of the cast. Inside the envelope was a short, handwritten note from Rudy Carr, the letters slightly shaky, the ink a pale blue. Mrs. Myers, I know Arthur saved me from losing my job in 1991. He gave me a chance when no one else would. I owe him a debt. When I took this case, I didn't realize the person being evaluated for capacity was his wife. I made a mistake. Please accept this as an apology and as my withdrawal. Enclosed are full copies of the file. I will take no further legal action related to Spencer Hale. Respectfully, Rudy Carr. I finished reading and couldn't speak. Marisol stayed quiet, giving me time to swallow each word. Part of me wanted to be angry, to shout that Carr was just washing his hands because he was losing, but another part understood cracks in a person sometimes only show when the light hits just right. And that light, strangely enough, came from a memory of Arthur. I folded the letter and set it beside the note Arthur had written to me in the will. Do not grant full authority to our son without an independent evaluation. 2 pieces of paper, 2 men, one who had tried to erase me from my own life, and one who, even gone, happened to shine the truth back into focus. Marisol pulled her laptop closer and drafted a formal warning to Spencer. Her voice was even and firm. I'll send this by both email and certified mail with return receipt. I glanced at the subject line. Subject. Notice of intent. Potential elder coercion under Wisconsin Statute 46.9. Below was a clear, concise paragraph. Any action, direct or indirect, to reinitiate a guardianship petition or to collect evidence beyond the scope of consent will be treated as elder coercion. All documents have been lodged with the Dane County Court with timestamps. Any further steps will be handled as criminal conduct. Marisol signed and hit send. The ping of a sent message sounded, final as a gavel strike. Now you just wait, she said. But not the passive kind of waiting. This is active waiting. The file is doing the work for you. I looked at her and nodded slowly. I understand. I'm not afraid of silence anymore. That afternoon, snow fell again. I cleared the table and stacked the documents neatly. In the dim light, Carr's envelope and Arthur's note lay side by side. I didn't know whether to call this a victory or simply justice showing its face, but I knew this. I was steady. Not because of a lawyer's power or any fancy tech, but because I'd stopped believing that being a mother meant swallowing it forever. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of the day. December 22nd, Attorney Carr withdrew. The file is sealed. The wall is built. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. The early tremors were gone. What remained was the quiet of someone who knows she has done the right thing. As night came, I stood at the window and watched snow thicken on the neighbors' roofs. The light reflected off the ice in a long, thin streak like a crack across glass. But not every crack is something to fear. Some cracks appear so the light can get through. I whispered, as if to Arthur and to myself, I didn't win, but I stood firm. And that's enough. Passive waiting ended there. From now on, I was no longer the mother waiting to hear, I'm sorry. I was the legal guardian of myself. The next afternoon, with half the snow melted, I was wiping down the old wooden cabinet when I heard the familiar engine outside the gate. No horn, no warning, just a car door slamming, hard and final. I knew at once Spencer. He came into the house without his usual confidence. Coat still on, a folder clamped under his arm, fingers rigid like he was holding something that could break. I recognized that posture. It was exactly how Arthur looked when he signed the last contract of his life, realizing he'd been betrayed by the person he trusted. Mom. His voice was low and rough, stripped of sweetness. I set the cloth down and poured myself a warm mug of spiced apple cider, the scent of cinnamon, mingled with oak from the kitchen, calling up old Christmases. I poured a second mug and slid it toward him. Sit, Spencer. In this cold, have something warm. He stood a few beats, then sat, reluctantly, still hugging the folder. I set the mug before him, then opened the cabinet and brought out 4 packets Marisol had helped me prepare. I placed each one on the table, gently, like laying out exhibits at trial. 1. Revocation of POA notarized. 2. Updated will, naming me as sole executor. 3. Capacity certification signed by Dr. Hartley Quinn with 2 witnesses. 4. Affidavit confirming all filings made and verified. I didn't circle around it. Spencer, I know what you want to ask. Before you speak, you need to understand, everything you see here is my lawful decision. No one can replace it. He looked down at the packets and stayed quiet. His shoulders locked. His eyes scanned the room, as if searching for signs of who helped me, Naomi, Marisol, someone. But I sat still, fingers laced, calm. Mom. His voice rasped, like he meant to argue, then stalled. I met my son's eyes. Spencer, I know what you're thinking. You believe someone put me up to this, don't you? But you're forgetting something. Before I was your mother, I was a keeper of evidence. My work is to keep the truth intact, no matter who tries to edit it. This time, I'm just doing my job. The air in the room was thick, and still enough to hear the clock. He glanced down the hall, toward the kitchen, toward the corner where I keep my notebook. Maybe he was hunting for the other hand at play, but there was nothing except what I had carefully arranged. Mom, don't lie anymore. I cut in, soft but firm. I'm not angry, I'm just tired of your performance. He frowned. You think I'm performing? I lifted the mug and turned it slightly. If you weren't, why was there a draft ready? Why does the word concerns in your email match Naomi's phrasing word for word? Why would someone I taught to write his name first now try to sign away my rights? He didn't answer. His eyes dropped to the floorboards. His hand shook a little on the folder. Mom, he said quietly, I thought I was protecting you. I smiled sadly. Protecting me by locking me up? A long silence stretched. I let it. Sometimes silence is the clearest mirror. I spoke again, steady as if reading a record. My silence these past months wasn't weakness, Spencer. It was observation. I listened, recorded, and kept it all. And I understand this. When someone fears losing control, they'll turn another person into the one who's incompetent just to feel safe. He looked up, lips parting to object, but my eyes held him. I poured a little more cider and nudged the mug toward him again. "You're still my son, but I won't sign anything else with your name on the representative line. From today on, every decision house, accounts, medical files will bear my signature." I slid Dr. Quinn's certification closer. "The doctor confirms I am fully competent. You can call him. He'll tell you exactly this. She remembers the small stories of her life better than I remember my prescriptions." He looked at the signature and seal, then back at me. "Did you do all this just to beat me?" "No," I said, gently. "I did it to stand firm." Spencer didn't respond. He opened his folder and took out a few papers, old copies, probably a half-drafted guardianship petition. He flipped for a while, then closed it. His hand dropped, eyes landing on the cover of the new will. "Mom, I don't know what Naomi has told you." But I raised a hand, stopping him. "It wasn't Naomi. I found it myself." "You were tracking me?" "No. You left a trail." I said it without malice, simply as a fact. He knew I wasn't lying. After a long moment, Spencer stood, no slamming, no shouting, no argument. He folded the folder he'd brought and set it back on the table right beside the revoked POA. He didn't crease it, didn't tear it, didn't throw it. He just left it there. I didn't stop him. We looked at each other one last time, the look of two people who once shared blood, now quietly admitting that something between them had broken. He turned away. When the door opened, cold air rushed in, carrying snow and the sound of footsteps fading. I stayed where I was. The cider steamed in front of me. I reached over and switched off the tiny recorder hidden under the ashtray. The red light went dark. On the screen, an autosave flashed. Conversation clean copy. I replayed the ending to confirm it had all been captured. My voice was calm, clear, never above what was needed. Spencer's voice, when it fell silent, sounded like the gap between two breaths. I saved the file under Confrontation Final, then got up, cleared the mugs, and boxed. The papers. That night, the snow quit. I sat by the window, looking out at the porch where the mic had once been the stage for scheming and for conversations. Only the wind moved the geranium pots now. I turned off every light but the one in my study. In a hazy dream, I saw myself in a bright room, boxes neatly labeled, ledgers clean, windows open, no shadows in the hall, no breath on my neck. Just me sitting in that room, one hand on the will, and a simple, deep feeling spreading. The right to decide had returned to its owner, and for me, that was enough. A week after that final conversation with Spencer, my house settled into a new rhythm, no longer strung tight, not quite peaceful yet. In that in-between, someone new arrived, carrying youthful breath and the precision of the digital age. Her name was Ava Kane, Marisol's niece, a senior in information and archival science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Marisol called me on Monday morning, her voice light, like he was suggesting something simple. "Miss Loretta, my niece wants a winter practicum. She studies archives, and you've got a data trove that needs security and order. Win-win." I laughed. "You rang the right bell. I've lived my whole life among files and seals." "Perfect. Let her stay a few weeks. She'll help you and learn what the textbooks don't teach." That afternoon, Ava arrived. A slim girl with dark brown hair, round glasses, a gray puffer coat. She carried 2 laptop bags and a small box labeled "External Drives Confidential." Her eyes were bright, a little shy, but her voice was sure. "I'm Ava. Thank you for letting me stay. Aunt Marisol said to call you Mrs. Myers, but if it's okay, I'd rather say Miss Loretta." I smiled. "Just Loretta." No formalities here. From the day Ava moved into the upstairs room, the house changed its breathing. Mornings, instead of the old radio, I heard keyboard taps from the study. She set up university-grade security, 3 layers of encryption, a local server, and a standardized naming convention for everything. I sat nearby, watching and warming inside like seeing a first student carefully label boxes in a museum. Ava tilted her head and asked, "Should I use ISO convention or keep it short like you do?" For example, 2025 Case Myers, Evidence 1. PDF or Myers Ev 1. Use ISO, I said. Dates are the quiet proof of continuity. Order doesn't lie. She grinned. I love how you put that order doesn't lie. I might borrow it for my paper. I didn't answer, just smiled. In her voice I heard energy. I'd lost a belief that if things are put in the right place, the world can be kinder. By noon, Ava had reset the desk, added 2 large monitors, and docked the drives. She printed colored labels for albums, legal, medical, personal, media evidence. Each folder carried a changelog, a small sheet noting who edited, when, and why. "Loretta," she asked, "may I digitize your paper notebooks? I won't change anything, just scan to searchable PDFs." I looked up and thought a beat. "Do it, but keep the originals. Real memory has its own smell, you can't compress that." Ava nodded hard. At school they teach that the physics of paper is part of the context. I like how you say it. Real memory has its own smell. In the afternoon, the scanner's hum and keystrokes blended into an easy rhythm like background music for a house that had known only the clock for too long. When Ava printed labels, the little printer's cadence reminded me of Arthur's old typewriter in the 1980s when he wrote his thesis. I watched her small hands fly and suddenly saw Arthur's shape double exposed him by the window, typing with all 10 fingers, murmuring lines about history and time. For a moment I realized what I lost had returned in a different form. At dinner, Ava ate with me at the kitchen table. I made potato stew, she brought garlic, toast. Midway through, the house phone rang. Spencer Hale lit up on the screen. I watched it glow and said nothing. Ava paused, spoon in midair. "Do you want me to—" "No, let it ring." The tone stretched and died. A moment later, voicemail blinked. I didn't press play. I didn't need to. "Aunt Marisol says," Ava murmured, "when someone tries to control your story, the best thing is not to react too fast." "She's right," I said. Silence is an answer, too. The next day, Ava pulled me out to the garage. I hadn't stepped there in years-old boxes, Arthur's things, keepsakes, letters gone yellow. "I want to label them. Every box deserves a name," she said, excited. "Not afraid of dust?" "Dust is evidence, too, Miss Loretta." We both laughed. 2 women, 2 generations, sat amid old wood smells and a bald bulb's weak light. Ava wrote labels: Arthur's research, family letters, travel 1989. She asked every detail: what paper Arthur liked, what ink, how he filed. I told her, my voice lighter without my knowing. He always used pale blue ink. Said darker ink hid the sadness in the words. "That's sad and beautiful," Ava whispered, eyes bright. By dusk, the garage was less chaotic. The boxes now had names and stood in straight rows. Ava dusted her hands and smiled. "See? When things are called by their real names, they line up on their own. And when a person's heart is called by its real name," I said softly, "it settles too." That night the house wasn't as still. The rhythm of Ava's typing upstairs mixed with page turns and the wind brushing the window. Each small sound made the house feel like it was breathing again. In the kitchen, a tea stain dried on the table. Once I would have wiped it at once. Now I left it. On the floor, a few label scraps waited to be swept. The house wasn't pristine, but it was alive. Ava sat on the stairs and smiled. You know, I read a journal line you wrote years ago. The house is as quiet as a museum. Now I think your museum has visitors. I laughed, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel forced. Before bed, I opened my journal. A fresh page, the paper scented faintly of pine. I used blue ink, the color Arthur loved. December 29th. Ava arrived. The house isn't still anymore. Neither am I. There's the sound of keys, the scent of tea, motes of dust floating in the light. Someone asks my opinion about naming rules. Someone laughs between the whir of a fan. And I realize living isn't just guarding files from deletion. Living is leaving fingerprints on the table, the cup, the paper to prove we touched this life. I set the pen down and closed the journal. Light from Ava's room spilled under her door. The steady tapping sounded like Arthur's typewriter played by different hands in a different age. I whispered almost a prayer. Thank you, Ava. And thank you, Arthur, because of you. I'm still learning how to go on. The house rested in warm light, a little noisy, a little messy, full of human presence. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was guarding an archive. I was living in it where every document, voice, and breath blended into the only evidence that matters. I'm still here. Thursday morning, my phone chimed. A text from Naomi, the daughter-in-law, who once said sweetly, "You just need to rest." Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I just want to talk once, to clear the misunderstandings. We truly only wanted what's best for you. I read it over and over, feeling equal parts irony and sadness. What's best? The phrase people use when they're trying to control someone. But I didn't refuse. I knew I needed to see them not for revenge but for closure. I replied briefly. 3 p.m., the old diner on Maple Street. They have cameras. My treat. That diner was where I took Spencer whenever he scraped a knee or failed at. School. We used to sit at the second booth by the window. I'd order him toast and vanilla ice cream. Now, I chose it again as a reminder. No past is erased. People just try to forget. At 2:50, I arrived first and took the old seat. The window still had a frosted film, sunlight sliding across the table in a bright stripe. I ordered black coffee and rested my hand on my purse inside, a USB drive and a copy of the old pledge. When Naomi came in, she wore a light knit coat, hair pulled back, worry flickering in her eyes beneath a practiced smile. Mom. Sit down, Naomi. Spencer followed, silent. He didn't look at me, just pulled out a chair. No one ordered more. Time in the diner seemed to stall. Naomi started, voice soft, trying for honest. Mom, really, we just wanted to make sure everything was safe. You live alone. Your health is unstable. We were afraid if something happened. I cut in not sharply, just tilted my head slightly. Safe for whom? Naomi? For me? Or for my retirement account? She flinched, then quickly regained her composure. No, it's not like that. It's just... Rudy Carr said if we finish the paperwork early then... She stopped mid-sentence. I saw Spencer's shoulders tense, but Naomi had already slipped. Then what? I asked slowly. Then there would be support from the Elder Care Fund. A portion of the fees is reimbursed if the person under guardianship has personal assets. The words dropped like a stone. I didn't need any more proof. A bonus for finishing early, that's what they called, stripping a living, lucid person of her autonomy. I didn't react. I didn't slam the table or shed a tear. I just looked at them as if they were two figures in a case file I'd just closed. Thank you for telling the truth, I said evenly. I think that's enough for today. I picked up my wallet, left money for the bill, and stood. Naomi reached for my hand, but I stepped. Back half a pace, gentle, final. Don't call this filial piety. You can't claim to love someone while drafting a plan to take their rights." Then I walked out. I didn't look back. Chairs scraped behind me, but I didn't stop. Outside, the cold wind slapped my face, the kind of cold that wakes you up. That evening, I told Marisol everything. She listened in silence, eyes far away, then said, "Miss Loretta, I think we should give them a chance to stop. If they'll apologize and end every legal move, we won't sue. Because in the end, your goal isn't to win." I nodded. "Right. The goal is to live in peace in my own home." Marisol drafted a settlement proposal. If Spencer and Naomi sign a commitment to cease all guardianship efforts, apologize in writing, and refrain from any future financial interference, you will not file suit. We'll lodge the minutes with the court for the record, but not publicly. 3 days later, Carr sent a letter, not from Spencer, from him, the former attorney. "Mrs. Myers, I hereby terminate all representation of Spencer Hale and Naomi Hale. I have advised them to withdraw and accept reconciliation. I ask that you consider closing this matter with the generosity I once saw in your husband." I read the letter, set it on the table, and felt a strange lightness, like when an old door falls shut after a gust of wind. That afternoon, the settlement meeting took place in Marisol's small office. The room was bright, simple, with cream-colored walls. Naomi sat across from me, eyes red, silent. Spencer beside her, hands clenched, looking tired. Marisol read each clause aloud, clear and precise. Clause 3. The respondents commit not to initiate or assist in any legal, financial, or medical action related to Mrs. Loretta Myers' representation without her written consent. I looked at Spencer. He kept his head down, said nothing. Final clause, Marisol continued. The respondents acknowledge overreach, commit to respecting Mrs. Myers' personal decisions, and sign to confirm. Pens touched paper. The sound was small, but it rang in me like a closing cadence. Naomi signed first, then Spencer. He glanced up for a moment, ready to speak, but my gaze kept him quiet. No anger left, just fatigue with a trace of pity. I understood. Fear of loss, of lack, of not being loved, had driven them to cruelty. I signed last, lightly, decisively. "Done," Marisol said, closing the file and stamping the confirmation. Naomi stood, bowed her head, and murmured, "I'm sorry, Mom." I answered, "I heard you." No hug, no tears, only silence, the kind with no resentment and no expectation. That evening I went home. Ava was labeling the last boxes in the garage. She looked up and smiled. "All done, ma'am? Everything okay?" I smiled, set my bag down. "Okay. The file is closed." I went upstairs to my study and opened the safe. I changed the code 3. New numbers with no link to anyone's birthday. I took out the new will and added one final line under the executor. Executor, Dane County Women's Scholarship Fund, designated by Loretta Myers. I didn't want my estate to become a tool for fights. I wanted it to become opportunity for girls like I once was, caught between a dream and a duty. When I finished, I sealed it, signed, and dated it. January 14th. Final revision. No further amendments. I closed the safe, sat down, and breathed slowly. No sense of triumph, no glee, just the quiet of someone who has restored her right to be left in peace. Ava brought up 2 cups of tea, faint orange blossom drifting in the air. "Ma'am, is it really over now?" "Yes. And the funny thing is, it didn't end with shouting, it ended with signatures." She smiled, setting the cup beside me. "A peaceful ending is also a win, Miss Loretta." I looked at the tea, steam fogging faintly, and said softly, "Maybe. But what I value more than winning is that I no longer have to prove I have a good memory. I just need to live as someone who deserves to be trusted." Ava nodded. Outside, the early spring wind brushed the maples by the porch. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a fortress, it felt like a home. I opened my notebook and wrote the day's last line. Let them speak first, then watch the truth stand up on its own. When I finished, I dotted the pen and closed the book. It felt like completing a dossier kept for a lifetime, nothing left to add, nothing left to hide. At noon, Ava tapped on the door, face bright, eyes a little pink. "Ma'am, I just got an email from school. They approved my thesis on preserving personal archives in private families. I'm going to use your system as a case study." I laughed and pulled her into a long hug. "Good, Ava. This house may be small, but it holds more than you think." She smiled softly. "When this term ends, I'll come back to finish the finding aid for the Myers family collection. I promise. I'll be waiting." I watched her pack up the laptop, folding each cable carefully. The room went quiet, but it was the kind of quiet with a heartbeat. I knew part of my story had traveled beyond these walls into books, classrooms, and maybe into the life of someone who's never met me. Toward evening, I opened the safe and took out 2 envelopes. One was the letter from Rudy Carr, the man who nearly turned me into a case, but withdrew in silence. The other was Arthur's handwritten note, the ink still faintly blue. "If the day comes when our son makes you doubt yourself, remember you see more clearly than you believe." I set them side by side, tied them with an old ribbon, and placed them in a wooden box. I whispered, 2 lessons, one about people, one about light. Then I locked the box and set it on the highest shelf, not to hide it, but to remind myself that once truth is lit, it doesn't need guarding. That night, I did something many would find hard. I invited Spencer to dinner. I didn't text Naomi. I sent my son a single line. "I'm cooking your favorite. If you're free, come by tonight." He arrived late, carrying a cheap bottle of wine, not saying much. I greeted him with a gentle smile. On the table, I had set 2 clean silver spoons, bright and polished. No mention of the past, no court, no agreements. I just poured warm apple cider and told a small story. Once you asked why I worked at the museum. I said because I don't want the truth forgotten. Now I understand something else. Sometimes truth needs forgiveness to rest. Spencer was quiet. He stared into his cup, hand tightening and loosening. I didn't need an apology. That silence was enough. We ate and talked about the weather, about the new neighbors. Dinner passed slowly, lightly, without bitterness. At the door, before he left, Spencer said softly, "Thank you for still letting me into the house." I answered, breath light. "This door was never locked, Spencer. I just needed time to hold the key." He nodded, said nothing more. When his car slipped past the maples, I closed the door not to shut him out, but to keep the night wind from coming in. I sat at the table and poured another cup of tea. The porch light shimmered through the window, steady and warm. Inside me was a quiet unlike those first days, not silence from fear, but the peace of someone who has said her piece. I thought of them all, Arthur, Carr, Marisol, Ava, and Spencer. Each one a tile in the larger mosaic, the one I once feared would never be complete. Now I knew it was never missing anything. It just needed time for me to see it clearly. I opened my journal one last time and wrote a few final lines. If someone has ever made you doubt yourself, remember that dignity doesn't need permission. If they call you weak, let time show you were simply preparing to stand, steadier. And if you ever feel alone, remember truth has its own strength, and it will rise when it's time. I set down the pen and closed the book, the spine clicking softly, a small, decisive sound, like the final seal in a registrar's life. Outside, the sky was turning pale blue. Ava texted from campus, "Ma'am, when I submit the thesis, I'll write, 'Dedicated to Loretta Myers, who taught me that order is not silence.'" I laughed out loud, my heart light as a freshly signed page. I turned off the light, opened the window, and let the night air in, listening to the soft hum of insects in the yard. Life has never been easy, but at least now I'm living it my way in my house, with my memories, and even with the mistakes I've forgiven. And if you've listened this far, maybe you know that feeling too when someone doubts you, belittles your voice, or makes you wonder if you're still trustworthy. I just want to tell you, dignity needs no permission. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's enough to stand up and guard your small truth, and the light will be enough to fill the room. If this story touched you, let me know which city you're listening from. Every comment reminds me I'm not alone. Thank you for staying to the end, and if you'd like, please like, subscribe, or catch the next story. I'll be here with you on quiet evenings just like this. As soon as I stepped into the wedding garden, the very moment I expected to see my daughter walk out in her white dress, I froze. Hanging right at the entrance under 2 rows of glowing golden lights was a large board with a photo of me and my husband. Underneath, in bold letters sharp as a blade, it read, "Do not let these 2 people in, by order of the bride." I stood motionless while my husband, Mark, went red, then pale. Guests glanced at us with puzzled looks, but they didn't know one thing. This entire wedding was secretly paid for with my own money, and they also didn't know that just a few hours later, I would destroy this ceremony in a way no one could ever imagine. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Carter, 61 years old, living in a quiet town in Ohio. I never thought my life would lead to a day like this, standing at the entrance of my own daughter's wedding, treated like a stranger, even forbidden to step inside. That feeling didn't even resemble sadness anymore. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out, placed it on a scale, and declared that I wasn't worth a single cent in my daughter's eyes. We had driven more than 3 hours to get there. Mark prepared a small speech, folded neatly and tucked into his suit pocket. I had spent the entire night before wrapping a little wedding gift, a white lace handkerchief my mother left me, a family heirloom. I wanted to give it to my daughter on the most important morning of her life. Every small hope vanished the moment I saw that wretched photo. I turned to Mark. His eyes trembled in a way I had never seen. We'd been married for more than 40 years. I'd seen him angry, exhausted, defeated, but never hurt the way he was at that moment. "Evelyn, what is this?" he whispered, his voice breaking. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, my head spinning, my legs glued to the ground. A young hotel attendant walked toward us, his face full of worry. I'm really sorry. I was instructed that if the 2 of you showed up, we can't let you in. This is a direct order from the bride. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The bride he referred to was Madeline Carter, my only child, the daughter I once held through long, feverish nights, the daughter I worked 2 shifts to pay for through college, the daughter I thought would hug me tightly on her wedding day. No, she chose to hang my picture outside the venue like I was a wanted criminal. Guests passing by glanced at us, some avoiding eye contact, others staring out of curiosity. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a public square, being stoned by the very person I raised. I squeezed Mark's hand. "Let's go," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He nodded. Neither of us said another word. We quietly turned away, each step heavier than the last. Every step felt like another cut to my heart. I heard the wedding music drifting from afar. The gentle violin sounded as if it were mocking my humiliation. When we reached the parking lot, I couldn't hold myself up anymore. I stopped, leaning against the car door, trying to breathe so I wouldn't collapse right there. I didn't want Mark to have to catch me like someone whose bones had just been shattered. "Evelyn, are you all right?" Mark asked, his voice trembling with worry. I pressed my lips together. "Mark, I really don't understand. Why would she do this? Why today, of all days?" He looked at me and shook his head. "I don't know, but standing here won't change anything. Let's go back to the hotel." We got into the car. Mark started the engine, but his hands were shaking. I placed my hand over his, searching for any warmth left in this moment of devastation. As the car rolled away from the dazzling wedding garden, I looked through the window. Everything behind us still looked beautiful, perfect, while inside, my heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. On the way back to the hotel, I tried to stay calm, but tears streamed down my face. Images of Madeline as a child replayed over and over, her messy blonde hair on school mornings, her bright laugh running across the yard, the tight hug she gave me the first time she earned an A. I once believed those sacrifices would be the bond between mother and daughter. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe when a child grows up with everything, she might accidentally see her mother's love as an obligation. I never imagined I had raised someone who could treat me as a burden. I tried to comfort myself. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Madeline didn't know. Maybe someone else hung the sign without her knowing. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Madeline knew. Madeline agreed. Madeline wanted this. I remembered the months preparing for the wedding, the moment I transferred $92,000 to the event planner, money I had saved for more than 30 years. I remembered how relieved I felt knowing my daughter would have the perfect day she dreamed of. I hid it from Madeline because I thought if she knew I paid, she would feel embarrassed or guilty. I hid it out of love, out of a mother's instinct to protect. But today, standing forbidden at the wedding entrance, I realized my daughter didn't feel grateful at all. She saw me as a debt, or worse, an embarrassment to hide. The car stopped in front of the hotel. Mark turned off the engine, but he didn't step out. He turned to me. "Evelyn, I know this hurts, but you have to understand. She's not the little girl we raised anymore. She changed when she got involved with the Whitmore family." I looked down at my hands, the veins raised, the faint calluses from years in the laundromat. I had built my entire life around Madeline. I never imagined the child I raised would be the one to push me out of her life on the most important day she had. I inhaled deeply. "Mark, did I do something wrong? Or are we just too poor, too ordinary for them?" Mark placed his warm hand on my shoulder. "No, Evelyn, we didn't do anything wrong, but sometimes being endlessly kind makes others think they have the right to walk all over you." I nodded, but inside me, something shifted, a feeling both painful and cold, as if a new door had opened, and behind it was a version of myself I had never dared to become, a version of Evelyn Carter, who would no longer bow her head. I looked out the window toward the golden lights of the wedding still flickering from afar. "Mark, you know what? I think I've been too gentle." "Gentle?" Mark frowned. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think it's time I take back everything I've given away." He stared at me, trying to read my thoughts, but even I wasn't fully certain yet. I only knew one thing. Tonight, I would no longer be the woman who endured humiliation in silence. A frightening yet clear idea began forming in my mind, slowly, quietly, but powerful enough to make me shiver. If Madeline wanted to erase me from her life on her most important day, then I could show her exactly who held all the real power over this ceremony. And I would not shed another tear. I sat silently in the hotel room, my eyes still slightly swollen after hours of holding back tears. But as memories flooded back, I no longer felt humiliated. Instead, I felt hollow, as if an invisible hand was opening each drawer of my past, forcing me to look closely, from where I started to the moment I lost the very child I raised. I was born in a tiny town in northern Ohio where winter winds blew so cold the window glass froze every morning. My family was poor, not the kind of poor where you skip a few luxuries, but so poor my parents burned scrap wood and cardboard to keep us warm. I grew up surrounded by the hum of an old heater and dinners of thin soup. But my father taught me the most important thing. Being poor wasn't the same as being worthless. And my mother taught me that a woman must stand on her own 2 feet. I carried those lessons throughout my life. When I married Mark, we started from nothing. Mark worked as a delivery driver for a furniture company. I got a job at a small laundromat on Main Street. The pay was small, but we saved every cent by cutting every expense possible. I became familiar with the smell of detergent, the damp chill of clothes straight out of old machines. My youth lived between heavy laundry baskets and hours of standing on aching legs. But it didn't matter, because when Madeline was born, every sacrifice became something I wanted to do. Madeline was stunning from day one. Soft brown hair, blue-gray eyes she inherited from Mark, and a smile that made me forget the scent of bleach still clinging to my hands. From the moment she could walk, we gave her everything our limited means allowed. I remember waking early to make pancakes before school, coming home from my shift and stopping by the thrift store to find her a little pink dress she would love. I wanted my daughter to grow up with what I never had, safety and enough. Madeline was brilliant. At 7, she read faster than her classmates. At 13, she won a small state science award. I cried with pride when her teacher told me, "Mrs. Carter, your daughter is exceptional." But sometimes I knew I spoiled her more than necessary. I justified it as making up for my own childhood. I thought loving more meant she would love me more. I was wrong. When she got into college, Mark and I worked harder so she wouldn't feel limited like we once did. I took on a second job cleaning offices at night. Every day I left the laundromat at 5, ate a quick sandwich, then worked until late. In winter, when snow piled thick and my back throbbed with pain, I still pushed through because I wanted her to have a future brighter than anything I could imagine. I don't remember how many hours I worked each week. I only remember holding that first $5,000 tuition bill and crying because I had actually managed to pay it. Madeline knew I worked hard, but as she settled into college life, her calls became fewer. First several a week, then once a week, then only occasionally. I understood. She was becoming independent, living the life Mark and I had worked so hard to give her. I didn't resent it, but I will never forget the day she graduated. She wore a black gown, a square cap, and honor cord around her neck. When she looked at me and Mark, she beamed, a smile I once thought I would never lose. "Mom, I did it," she said, and I cried in the middle of the campus lawn. I was proud, so proud it hurt. But pride lasted only a short while. After she started working, Madeline came home less. Her stories centered on coworkers, clients, business trips, fancy events in Columbus and Cleveland. We became background figures, appearing only during holidays. Then one day she called to say she wanted to bring her boyfriend home. I hoped he would be kind, like Mark, someone genuine, hardworking, steady. But when Andrew Whitmore stepped through the door, I knew immediately that my daughter's path had taken a sharp turn. Andrew was the type of man who believed he was above others. Expensive suit, gleaming watch, a voice polite yet cold. He shook Mark's hand with barely any pressure, then scanned our home as if assessing its monetary value. I disliked him instantly, But Madeline, she was dazzled. Her eyes lit up whenever he spoke about managing finances, his wealthy family in Chicago, vacations in the Florida Keys. I saw clearly she was mesmerized by a world we had never belonged to and had never sought. I stayed polite, joined the conversation, but felt the first needle prick at the bond between me and my daughter. The second meeting was worse. The Whitmore family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. The moment I stepped inside, I felt out of place. White tablecloths, layered wine glasses, dishes. Expensive enough to cover a week of rent. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you made it." Polite words, cold tone. All dinner long, she questioned my laundromat job, not out of interest, but superiority. Andrew spoke about the family's business investments, elite social circles, exclusive events. Every sentence implied that Madeline was moving up into a world far above us. Mark tried to stay composed, but his eyes often dropped to the tablecloth, anger mixed with resignation. That night, riding home, I sat in the back seat silently asking myself, what had I created? How had I raised a child who didn't notice the disrespect from the family she was marrying into? I never found an answer. Madeline's changes came gradually but clearly. She visited less, called less. When she did come home, she talked only about Andrew, where they went, who they met, their elevated plans for the future. Not once did she ask if I was still working 2 jobs, or how my health was, or if Mark was doing all right. The distance grew, and for the first time in my motherhood, I feared losing my daughter. The turning point came when Madeline announced Andrew had proposed. I wanted to be happy, but her smile wasn't the smile I used to know. It was the smile of someone stepping into a life where we were merely shadows behind her. That was the first small crack in my heart, a crack that the sign at the wedding entrance shattered entirely. I sat on the hotel bed holding the lace handkerchief, asking myself, how did I raise her for her to remove me from her life in the most brutal way? But that question had no time for answers, because a harsher truth settled in. Today was merely the result of a long chain of hurts. Hurts I had ignored because I kept telling myself my daughter still loved me the way she once did. I didn't know then that all of this was only the beginning of deeper pain and betrayal waiting ahead. I was still leaning against the hotel headboard, gripping the lace handkerchief as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Memories of Madeline and years of raising her twisted together in my mind, carrying me toward another moment I should have recognized sooner, the first dinner with the Whitmore family. Looking back, it feels like the first chapter of a book I wish I had never opened. That afternoon, I woke earlier than usual to clean the house. I wanted our small home to look warm and tidy. I baked apple pie, Madeline's childhood favorite, thinking it might make her feel like she was coming back to the home she grew up in. I polished the wooden dining table and placed a vase of white daisies in the center. Mark went to the grocery store for extra drinks, nervously asking me, should I wear the blue shirt or the white one? I laughed and said, either one, Mark. They're coming to meet us, not interview us. He chuckled softly, but I knew he was anxious. Both of us wanted to make a good impression on the man our daughter had chosen. When the doorbell rang, my heart pounded as if I were preparing for an important ceremony. Madeline walked in first, her hair softly curled, her face glowing. She gave me a quick hug, then stepped aside to introduce Andrew. Andrew wore a charcoal shirt under an expensive blazer, and his shoes were so shiny I could have seen my reflection in them. He smiled and extended his hand, but his eyes swept across my living room as if he were checking the value of every item. I had never liked that look. It wasn't the look of someone curious or wanting to know his future wife's family. It was the look of someone appraising merchandise. "Wonderful. Thank you for having me," Andrew said, his voice polite, crisp, and a bit too perfectly measured. I invited them to sit and brought out the apple pie. Madeline took a bite and smiled, a rare smile I hadn't seen on her in a long time. But Andrew only tasted a small piece and said, "Oh, very homey." His tone sounded both like praise and like a subtle suggestion that my baking wasn't quite up to standard. Mark glanced at me, and I just smiled as if I hadn't heard anything. But the moment I went into the kitchen to pour tea, I heard Andrew whisper to Madeline, "Too sweet. You know I don't like old-fashioned baked goods." Madeline let out a soft laugh. "Mom's been making it like that forever." I stood there behind the kitchen door for a few seconds, feeling the air around me disappear. But I walked out again, keeping my smile, convincing myself I was being oversensitive. It was the first meeting, I reminded myself, and I wanted to believe Andrew was simply a little snobbish, not a bad person. I was wrong. A week later, Andrew's family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. I had already felt uneasy when Madeline called earlier and said, "Mom, just wear something comfortable." That sentence made me anxious. Her idea of comfortable was nothing like what comfortable meant for me. I chose a simple navy dress Mark had given me for our anniversary. It wasn't brand name, but it was clean, lovely, and appropriate. Mark wore the blue shirt I had picked for him last time. We walked into the restaurant. Warm, dim lighting, soft violin music, the faint scent of wine drifting through the air. I felt like I was stepping into a world that wasn't meant for me. The Whitmore family was already seated. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked up and scanned me from head to toe. Her gaze lingered slightly too long on my shoes, then moved to Mark, then to the inexpensive handbag I was holding. "Oh," she said, lips curving faintly. "Very simple." I heard her clearly. Everyone did. But Mark gave a polite smile, and I tried not to let the heat of embarrassment rise up my cheeks. Dinner began with questions disguised as small talk, but laced with condescension. Margaret asked what I did for a living. I answered honestly. I worked at a small laundromat near our home. She raised an eyebrow. "Ah, that must be quite tiring." I knew that tone. People used it when they didn't want to openly admit they looked down on your job. Then she turned to Mark. She asked whether a delivery driver's salary was sufficient. The question carried no kindness at all, and I saw Mark's back stiffen and his hand tighten around the napkin. Meanwhile, Andrew talked about his family, about their investment companies, about parties in Chicago, about real estate projects I couldn't even understand. Every word he said felt like a reminder of the distance between their world and ours. Margaret looked at Madeline with calculated pride. "She's so smart, so beautiful. She deserves a better future, don't you think?" I knew exactly what she meant by a better future. And I knew she said it deliberately in front of me. But I stayed silent. I didn't want to make Madeline uncomfortable. Mark, unlike me, couldn't hide his emotions well. He kept glancing at me, his eyes filled with frustration and helplessness. But he restrained himself. For Madeline. For what was supposed to be a beautiful evening. A little later, Andrew took Madeline's hand, kissed the back of it, and announced, "I've proposed to Madeline. My family will take care of the entire wedding. We want a ceremony that matches our standards." Madeline nearly teared up with joy. I felt my heart beat slow, not because I wasn't happy for her, but because something inside me suddenly sharpened. Something was wrong. I couldn't explain it. It felt like a cold draft down my spine, like an alarm quietly going off in the back of my mind. I looked at the Whitmores, the perfect smiles, the arrogant eyes, the polished words, and I knew nothing here was genuine. Not the promises, not the generosity, not the welcome they pretended to give Madeline. And it didn't take long for that intuition to prove itself in the cruelest way possible. The days after the dinner in Columbus, the uneasiness stayed with me. It wasn't a sudden blow like lightning. It was a slow, creeping fog settling into every corner of my thoughts. I tried to deny it, telling myself my daughter was simply growing up, stepping into a world I wasn't familiar with. But then, one afternoon, Madeline came to my house. And the moment she spoke, I knew the change wasn't small anymore. I had just finished my shift at the laundromat, my hand still carrying a faint scent of detergent. Madeline walked in, dressed neatly as if she had just left an important office meeting. I invited her to sit in the kitchen, where I had prepared 2 cups of mint tea, our old habit whenever she visited. But this time, she didn't look at the tea, didn't ask if I was tired. She only leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as if she were preparing for a negotiation rather than talking to her mother. "Mom," she began, her voice light as if hiding something. "Andrew's family has decided they'll cover the entire wedding cost." I forced myself to stay calm. "Oh, I see. Yes, so you and Dad don't need to worry about anything." She said it with a relieved expression, as if she had just dropped a burden she'd been carrying. But that relief pierced me. Since when had our lack of wealth become something that embarrassed her? I nodded and smiled. "If that's what you want, I won't object." Madeline hugged me briefly, then left almost immediately. When the door shut behind her, the house felt strangely cold. I stood still for a long moment, a nameless weight pressing on my chest. Something wasn't right. I picked up the phone and searched for the event planning company Madeline had mentioned the night before. When the staff answered, I tried to sound casual. "Hi, I'm the mother of the bride, Madeline Carter. I'd like to ask about the event cost." The woman quickly opened the file. "Yes, the estimated total is $92,000, but we haven't received any deposit or payment yet." I went silent. I had to take a deep breath before answering. "None at all?" "That's correct. We're waiting for the contract holder to make the transfer." When I hung up, my hands were ice cold. So the Whitmore family never planned to pay. Every generous promise had been a performance, a show meant to make Madeline feel lucky to be marrying into their world and to make her believe they were a stronger support system than the parents who raised her. I sat down, staring out at the backyard where the old maple tree stood, silent as if listening, and the only thought I had was, if they won't pay, what will happen to the wedding? And worse, did Madeline know? Or was she also a victim of their shiny lies? I couldn't let my daughter be humiliated. No matter how much she had changed, no matter how much it hurt, I was still her mother. And a mother doesn't let her child fall in front of hundreds of people. That night, I called the event planning company back. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll pay the entire cost, but one condition. Do not tell anyone, including the bride, that I am the one paying." The staff member hesitated, then agreed. I transferred the money in 3 large payments, amounts I never imagined I would spend in my lifetime. When it was done, I sat alone in the dark living room, listening to the dry ticking of the wall clock. I had emptied nearly all the savings Mark and I had built over 30 years, money meant for our peaceful retirement. But the part that hurt most wasn't the money. It was knowing that if Andrew or the Whitmores claimed later that they paid for everything, Madeline would believe them immediately without asking me a single question. In the following days, whenever Madeline called, not to check on me, but to gush about how generous Andrew's family was, my heart shrank a little more. I heard her pride in things I knew were lies. I smiled through the phone, hiding the hollow ache inside. I wanted to tell her the truth, but every time I tried, I imagined her face, bright eyes, confident voice, blind trust in the Whitmore family. I feared she'd think I was jealous, or worse, that I wanted to sabotage her wedding, so I stayed silent. I told myself her happiness was enough, that she would eventually understand my love. But as time passed, she called less. Messages became shorter. "I'm busy, Mom," or "Don't worry, I've got everything handled." I felt myself being pushed out of the very life I had built for her. Stories of the Whitmores filled the space between us. She dined with them, traveled with them, attended their exclusive parties, never once inviting me. Every photo she posted made me disappear a little more. I realized then it wasn't that their world was too big. It was that they wanted mine to become too small for her to see. One morning, while I was folding clothes at the laundromat, Mark called. Madeline had texted that she couldn't come for dinner that weekend. She had a business networking event with Andrew's family. I only said, "It's okay, don't be upset." But inside, memories of raising her scattered like fallen leaves in a storm. Distance doesn't come in one day. It arrives from many quiet moments. Moments when I convinced myself everything was fine. Moments when I ignored hurtful words. Moments when I believed motherly love was a wall that could never collapse. But the wall had already fallen, and I stood among the rubble, not knowing how to make my daughter see me the way she once did. I didn't know then that everything I had endured was only the beginning of something far more painful and far more cruel, something that would lead to the moment I was humiliated at her wedding entrance, and then to the moment I decided to reclaim the power I had given away for so many years. I remember that afternoon vividly. Gray skies, heavy clouds, hanging low over Ohio like a warning. I stood in front of Madeline's apartment door for a long time before pressing the bell. Not because I was afraid of being turned away, but because I feared hearing something that would hurt even more than what I had already suffered. But I knew I had to go. I had to talk. I had to understand what was happening to the daughter I had spent my entire life protecting. I inhaled deeply and rang the bell. The door opened within 3 seconds, and instead of Madeline, it was Andrew standing there. He wore a white shirt buttoned to the collar, holding his phone like whatever conversation he'd been having was more important than anything else. When he saw me, his eyebrows tightened. Just slightly, but enough for me to understand I was not a welcome sight. "Ah, Mrs. Carter." He glanced at his watch. "Madeline didn't say you were coming today." I forced politeness into my voice. "I just want to talk to her for a moment. Just a few minutes." Andrew stepped aside, though stiffly, as if he were letting in a delivery person rather than his future mother-in-law. I walked in, trying to smile, though the coldness in that beautifully decorated apartment made me shiver. It was elegant and perfectly arranged, but missing something I couldn't name. Warmth, soul, life. Madeline came out of the bedroom holding a thick clipboard. Her hair was pulled into a high ponytail, and she wore a sleek, smart band on her wrist. She looked at me, hesitated for a second, then said, slightly rushed, "Mom, I'm getting ready for a meeting with the wedding planner. What do you need?" A simple question, but not a hint of joy at seeing me. I forced a bright expression. I just wanted to check if you needed any help. The wedding is coming soon. Madeline sighed. Andrew's family is handling everything. You really don't need to worry. The way she stressed the word they made me pause. Still, I swallowed it down, trying to keep my voice steady. What about our seating for the ceremony? No one from the planning team has contacted me, so I just want to be sure. Madeline glanced at Andrew as if seeking permission. Andrew shrugged, then answered for her. There are many important guests from my family, so your table will be a standard one in the middle section. It can't be near the stage. I looked at them. 3 seconds passed, long enough to age someone. I turned to Madeline. You decided that? Madeline reluctantly nodded. Mom, there will be business people, Dad Andrew's friends. You understand, right? You and Dad still get a nice table, just not the main one. I once thought I was strong, but hearing that felt like a stone dropping onto my chest, not because of the seating, because for the first time, my daughter saw me as someone outside her life. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. And the tradition of your father walking you down the aisle? Madeline looked at Andrew again. That single glance told me everything. My daughter was no longer someone who would speak for herself. She was waiting for him to speak for her. Andrew cleared his throat. We're not doing that old giving the bride away tradition. Madeline will walk in alone. She's independent. It's modern. Madeline gave a small, awkward smile. You understand, right? I don't want to look like a traditional bride. The word traditional felt like a cold blade pressing into my chest. All those years I held on to traditions, family dinners, holidays, little routines that shaped Madeline's childhood, now dismissed as outdated burdens. I stared at my daughter, the same child who once ran through our backyard as Mark and I chased after her, the child who clung to me during nightmares, the child who cried when classmates teased her. And there she was, telling me. Everything I represented was an embarrassment. Why, Madeline? I asked softly. Why don't you want your father and me near you on your wedding day? She froze for only a second. Then she looked away as if searching for the kindest possible lie. It's not like that, Mom. It's just, there are certain images we need to present at the wedding. You know, Andrew's family does big business. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I heard the meaning behind every word. I understood that we, Mark and I, did not fit the image my daughter wanted to display. I took a deep breath. Let me ask you one thing, Madeline. Do you still see your father and me as family? Madeline grew uneasy and turned away. Andrew stood right behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, as if both comforting her and asserting control. Mom, don't make this a big deal, Madeline said. I'm very busy. Busy. One simple word, yet it drew a clear line between us. I found myself standing in my own daughter's apartment, feeling like every decoration and every color on the walls whispered the same message. You don't belong here anymore. I nodded. I understand. I turned around. Andrew didn't walk me out, and Madeline didn't follow. When the door closed behind me, I stood in the cold, bright hallway, my hands trembling, and then I cried. Not the angry, heaving kind of cry. It was the cry of someone stripped of the most sacred place she'd ever held in life, the place of being a mother. I cried so hard I didn't hear the elevator open. Mark was waiting for me in the car. When I got in, he saw my swollen eyes and didn't ask anything. He simply placed his hand over mine, lightly, but enough for me to feel the grief spreading through every part of me. I leaned my head against the window, watching the blur of cars outside. The air inside the car felt heavy as lead. Mark spoke softly. "Evelyn, don't let her hurt you like this. I know how much you love her, but maybe she's not the little girl she used to be." I nodded without looking at him. "But I still hope on her wedding day she'll realize how unreasonable she's been. I still want to believe that." Mark gently squeezed my hand. Hope is the last thing we should let go of. But deep in my heart, I knew that hope was already cracking. I felt like I was clinging to a rope that was fraying strand by strand, held together only by fragile belief. I didn't know that. Just days later, that same daughter would leave me standing before a wedding gate, staring at a picture that barred me from entering, and the heartbreak of this afternoon would become the final warning I failed to heed. 1 week before the wedding, when, under normal circumstances, I should have been counting down the hours until my daughter stepped into a new chapter, Madeline called me. I remember clearly. I was in the kitchen, just lifting the lid off a pot of chicken soup when the ICO phone buzzed. Her voice sounded calm, but underneath that calmness was something sharp, something only a mother who'd grown accustomed to disappointment could detect. "Mom," she said quickly, as if she had another meeting waiting. "I need your help with something." I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "All right, go ahead." And then, with one single sentence, she delivered a blow so staggering that even now, when I remember it, my chest feels hollowed out. "Mom, can you cut everyone from our side of the guest list? Andrew's family guests are increasing. I need to prioritize people. Important for my future." I froze. The spoon slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a small but echoing clang that filled the quiet kitchen like the toll of a bell. I couldn't speak for several seconds. I just stood there, trying to register what my daughter had asked of me. "Madeline," I whispered, my voice trembling like a child's first lie. "Cut everyone?" But they already received their invitations. "We double-checked," Madeline replied, still breezy. "Your list has a lot of people who really don't have anything to do with my new life. They don't serve any purpose for me and Andrew." It felt like a slap across my face, not because she wanted to cut guests, but because of how she spoke about the very people who had helped me raise her through the hardest years, the ones who brought over cans of soup when money was tight, who babysat her when I worked double shifts, who treated her like family though we shared no blood. "You're saying they don't serve any purpose for your future?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt like it was blocked with stone. Madeline sighed as if I was the difficult one. "Mom, don't make this heavy. It's my wedding. I want everything perfect. Andrew's family has a lot of important connections. You know that. I can't seat his father's business partners next to our relatives from Dayton. It just wouldn't look right." My hand began to shake. "But they're our family, sweetheart." Madeline went silent for a few seconds. Then she dropped the sentence that shoved me off the cliff. "Family has limits too, Mom. You understand that." No, I did not understand. I had always believed sacrifice was the language of motherhood, that if I loved her enough, she would know. But in that moment, I realized some children, when placed under glittering lights, forget the warm lamps that once kept them safe. Madeline continued, brisk and decisive. "Please notify everyone. Just tell them there's a seating issue. Make it sound polite for me." I leaned against the counter because without it, I might have collapsed. I couldn't believe this was the same little girl who once clung to my leg and cried when another child refused to share a toy. "All right," I whispered. "I'll take care of it." There was no thank you, no hesitation, just a quick, "Good, I'm busy, Mom." And then the line went dead. I looked around the kitchen, the towel, the chicken soup, the spoon on the floor. Everything seemed familiar, yet I no longer recognized myself. That night, I called each relative, my cousin, my 2 nieces, my elderly aunt in Cincinnati, Uncle Harold's family, people who had never once missed any milestone in our lives. And each time I had to repeat the lie, "Oh, it's just a seating issue. We have to cut back. Please understand." Every voice on the other end carried disappointment softened by kindness. "It's all right, Evelyn, as long as she's happy." I bit my lip until I tasted blood just to stop myself from crying on the phone. When I hung up after the last call, I couldn't hold back any longer. I set the phone down and let the tears fall. Not just tears of hurt, but of betrayal over how my daughter had trampled every value that once held our family together. Mark heard me crying and rushed in from the living room. He held me without asking because he already knew. He had seen the distance growing every day. I pressed my face into his shoulder, my voice breaking. "Mark, she said our family doesn't serve any purpose for her future." Mark closed his eyes, his hands gripping my shoulders. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I know you're hurting, but you don't deserve this. You don't." I shook my head, tears falling on his shirt like ink stains. "What if we tell her the truth? You paid all $92,000. She wouldn't disrespect us like this if she knew," Mark said plainly. I stayed silent for a long time. Then I shook my head. "No, not now. If she finds out I paid, she'll shame herself in front of her new family. She'll think I did it to pressure her or out of jealousy. I don't want that." Mark looked at me, his eyes a mix of worry and heartbreak. "But if you keep letting her treat you like this..." I cut in softly. "On her wedding day, she'll see me there. She'll realize how wrong she's been. I believe that. The wedding will be the moment she understands." I said it, but deep down I knew that hope was fragile. So fragile that the slightest breeze could shatter it. I wanted to believe in my daughter so badly it made me foolish. I wanted to think that somewhere inside her there was still room for me. That night I cried until I was exhausted, until my eyes burned. I fell asleep with that tiny, flickering hope that the wedding would mend what had been broken. But I was wrong. When the wedding day arrived, I fixed my silvering hair, put on the navy dress Mark loved most, and held the small gift I'd wrapped all week. I stepped out of the hotel with my heart full of hope. Hope that my daughter would see me, smile, and run to hug me like she used to. Instead, when Mark and I stepped up to the garden gate, under the soft glow of golden lights, a massive sign greeted us. On it was our picture, and the bold, slicing words, "Do not let these two in, bride's orders." In that moment, the last drop of hope inside me was crushed into dust, and I, someone who once believed love was enough, stood there learning how to breathe again after having my heart shattered. I don't remember how I got back to the hotel. I only remember sitting stiffly in the car, hands trembling in my lap, unable to process any of it. Mark placed his hand on my back, rubbing slow circles, but the hollow ache in my chest didn't ease. It wasn't a pain of the body. It was deeper, hollowing. When Mark closed the door behind us, I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in my freezing hands, and like a string pulled too tight, finally snapping, I broke into sobs. Not soft sobs, choking ones, the kind that makes breathing impossible. Humiliation, grief, betrayal, confusion, everything crashed over me at once. Mark sat beside me, holding on to my shoulders. "Evelyn, we don't need to stay here. I'll pack our bags. We'll leave right now. We'll go home. Forget this ever happened." I wanted to nod. I wanted to say, "Yes, let's go." but inside me was a strange emptiness, as if I had lost a part of myself, and leaving now felt like admitting my daughter had the right to hurt me without consequence. I tried to inhale, but the breath dissolved before reaching my chest. Mark, I don't know what to do. He stroked my hair. We'll go home. You don't need to take any more of this. I was about to answer when my phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. Ohio area code, but not saved in my contacts. Mark gestured for me not to pick up, but something, I couldn't name what, made me reach for the phone. Hello? I whispered, my voice rough. A young woman's shaky voice came through, someone who seemed to have struggled before deciding to call. Mrs. Carter? Is this you? My name is Chelsea Rivera. I'm one of the event coordinators at the Linden Garden tonight. I blinked. Chelsea? I don't think we've met. I know, she said. I heard her swallow, then her voice quickened. But I saw what happened at the gate. I was standing inside when they put the sign up. I'm so sorry I witnessed it and couldn't do anything. I gripped the phone, my palms dampening. You're calling because of that? Not just because of that, Mrs. Carter. Her voice dropped, trembling slightly. I'm calling because I know you're the one who paid for the entire wedding tonight. My fingers went numb. How do you know that? I asked, my voice almost colorless. Because I checked the contracts before the event. Every receipt, every payment record, every signature, everything has your name on it. You're the only one who paid in full. There isn't a single cent from the Whitmore family. My heart thudded so hard I pressed my hand against my chest. A long stretch of silence passed between two breaths. Chelsea continued, her voice thick with hesitation. And there's something else you should know. I heard her swallow again as if bracing herself. 2 hours before the ceremony, I walked past the bridal suite. I overheard the bride and the Whitmore family talking. They were talking about you. The air around me froze. Chelsea? What did they say? Her voice trembled, but each word stabbed like a blade. They called you trashy and poor. They mocked you for trying to act classy. They said the wedding would be less embarrassing if you didn't show up. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. Chelsea pressed on, her voice full of pity. I saw the bride, Madeline, smile when they talked about the no entry sign. They said it would solve the problem once and for all. Mark heard enough to rush over and hold me, but I couldn't feel his warmth. I only heard Chelsea's voice, small but sharp as broken glass. Mrs. Carter, I can't stay quiet, not when I know the truth. You have the right to cancel the entire event, all of it, because you paid for it, and you can do it at any moment tonight. I opened my eyes. The hotel room spun around me. I have that right? I asked, sounding like a stranger to myself. Yes, you're the contract holder. If you request the sound to stop, the lights to go off, the service to end, we have to obey immediately. For a moment, I heard nothing but the rush of blood in my ears, like waves hitting rock. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel. Power. Not the power of money, the power of truth, the power of justice, the power that comes when someone is pushed so low that standing back up becomes its own form of strength. Mrs. Carter, Chelsea asked, are you still there? I placed a hand over my chest because for the first time in months, my heart wasn't just aching, it was awakening. Yes, I whispered, I'm here. Would you like me to send over the document confirming your right to terminate the event? I looked at Mark. He was watching me as if asking, "Evelyn, what are you thinking?" But I couldn't answer him. Not yet. Not when a door inside me, one I had always kept locked, was opening wider with every second. Chelsea spoke again, her voice steady and sincere. "Mrs. Carter, I know you're a good person, but sometimes good people need protection from those who take advantage of their kindness." I inhaled slowly, and an idea, terrifying but perfectly logical, began to take shape in my mind, a thought that the version of me from a few years ago would have trembled at and pushed away immediately. But the version of me now? I had been pushed to the very edge. I had been humiliated in front of strangers. I had been stripped of my place as a mother by my own daughter. I had been trampled on by people who saw me as nothing but weeds in their lives. And now, when Chelsea spoke her final sentence, "You just have to say the word, one word," I understood that my kindness had been stepped on one time too many. I understood that some lessons can only be taught through silence, and some lessons can only be taught through action. And I, the gentle mother who had endured all her life, began to see with painful clarity the path I had to take next. No more trembling, no more weakness, only one decision, cold, rational, and entirely mine. After hanging up with Chelsea, I sat still for a long time, still enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner and the faint traffic far below. Mark sat beside me, his hand resting softly on my knee, like a thread keeping me attached to reality. But inside, I knew I had just crossed a line I could never return from. "Evelyn," Mark whispered, "what are you thinking?" I lifted my head and looked straight into his eyes. For the first time throughout this ordeal, I no longer said, "I don't know." "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that it's time she understands that actions have consequences, not through words, through the one thing she's clinging to, this wedding." Mark was silent. He didn't rush to comfort me, nor did he try to dissuade me. He simply looked at me for a long time, then nodded, heavy, reluctant. "So, what are you planning to do?" I inhaled deeply and picked up my phone. My fingers still trembled slightly, but this time out of adrenaline, not fear. I opened the contact card Chelsea had sent. The hotel manager, Mr. Harris. I made the call. The phone rang a few times before a polite middle-aged man answered. "Good evening. This is Christopher Harris, manager at the Linden Garden. How may I help you?" "This is Evelyn Carter," I said plainly, "the person listed on all contracts for tonight's wedding. I need to confirm a few things." His tone shifted immediately, becoming more careful. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Carter. I have your file right here." I heard the shuffle of papers and the tapping of a keyboard. My heart beat steadily now, not fast, not erratic. For the first time, I felt myself speaking without bowing my head, without asking for permission. "I want to know," I said clearly, "whose name appears on every contract related to tonight's wedding, the venue, decor, catering, sound, and lighting." "Let me check," Mr. Harris replied. A few seconds later, he continued, "All contracts are under your name, Mrs. Carter. Every payment we received came from your account. There is no Whitmore name on any document." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Hearing what I already knew, but from someone with authority, made it feel heavier, more final. "In that case," I continued, "legally, the person who has the right to cancel or stop all services during the event is me, correct?" A pause, then a quiet exhale. "Under contract principles, yes, Mrs. Carter. If you request that services stop, we must comply. But I must warn you, that would cause significant disruption." "I understand," I cut in calmly. I am not asking you to do it now. I simply need you to confirm that if I call back and request all music, service, lighting, and venue use to stop, you will do so, correct? There was something like respect, maybe even fear in his voice when he responded, "Yes, Mrs. Carter. If you, as the paying client, request it, I will proceed. But I hope you consider this carefully." "I already have," I replied. "One more thing. I want every decision, communication, and adjustment tonight documented. Emails, internal notes, all of it must have a clear trail." "Of course," he said. "We will email you a confirmation. It will state clearly that you are the one requesting service termination." "Thank you, Mr. Harris," I said, my voice low. "I may call again tonight. When I do, I expect everything to follow what you've just confirmed." "I understand, Mrs. Carter," he answered, "and I'm sorry for what happened at the gate. No mother deserves that." I didn't address the last sentence. I simply said, "Have a memorable evening," and ended the call. Mark stared at me, eyes wide. "Evelyn, you're really going to do it?" I turned to him. "Do you think I have another choice? She dragged me to the lowest point she could find. If I stay silent, I'm only teaching her that she can trample others without consequences." Mark put his arm around my shoulders. "I won't stop you. I'm only hurting because I know tonight will be the final nail in the door between you and her." I nodded softly. "That door? It's been locked for a long time, Mark. I just refuse to admit it." I straightened up and pulled my laptop closer. The light from the screen reflected off my tired, calloused hands. I opened a new email, typing with a calmness that almost frightened me. Recipient, Margaret Whitmore, Andrew's mother. Subject, regarding your family's generosity for tonight's wedding. I began, "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, this is Evelyn Carter, the bride's mother. First, thank you for proudly telling everyone that your family covered all the wedding expenses. That must feel wonderful for you. Attached are all contracts, invoices, and bank payment receipts in case you'd like to refresh your memory. In case it has escaped your attention, every dollar of the $92,000 spent on tonight's wedding was paid by me. Not you, not Andrew, not anyone named Whitmore. If you'd still like to boast about your family's generosity tonight, feel free to do so, with full understanding of the truth. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter." I attached everything. Hotel invoices, transfer receipts, contracts bearing my signature, even the PDF bank. Statements I downloaded earlier, irrefutable. I didn't send it yet. I scheduled the email to send automatically at 8:30 p.m., just when everyone would be seated, the dinner service underway, and the Whitmores likely bragging loudly. I closed the laptop, then reopened it. There was still one more thing. I found my sister's contact, Linda Carter, the one who stood by me through the hardest years, the one Madeline erased from the guest list without hesitation. I called her. "Sis?" Linda answered after 2 rings. "I've been waiting for your call. How is everything over there?" I paused, then asked, "Are you home?" "Yes, we're all having dinner. We keep wondering how the wedding is going. I didn't want to bother you." I swallowed. "Linda, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to stay calm when you hear what I'm about to say." Her tone changed instantly. "Don't scare me. What happened?" I told her. Every detail. From paying the entire wedding cost, to Madeline cutting the whole family from the list, to the sign with our picture banning us from entering. Linda didn't speak. I heard rushed breathing, a chair scraping back, someone in her house asking, "What's wrong?" and then silence. When I finished, Linda exhaled shakily, so deeply I heard the strain in her ribs. "Sis, she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't tell me you're still there. I'm at a hotel nearby, but Linda, I didn't call just to vent. I need you to do something." "Anything," she said immediately. "Tell me." "I need you to call every single relative Madeline erased from the list. Tell them the truth. Tell them I paid for everything. Tell them she banned her own parents at the door. Tell them she said our family serves no purpose for her future." Silence. I knew Linda was hold her back fury. "You want them to know?" she finally asked. "I want," I said softly, "that when Madeline spins her story later, our family already knows the truth. I'm not asking them to storm the wedding. I just don't want them carrying shame on my behalf anymore." Linda inhaled sharply. "All right, I'll do it. I swear by tonight our whole family will know who has heart and who threw it away." Her voice softened. "Sis, I'm sorry I'm not there with you right now." I gave a faint, tired smile. "You are here, just in a different way." We ended the call. Staring at my phone, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. Even if Madeline cut herself off, the people who walked with me through hardship still stood firmly by my side. And tonight, I wouldn't let anyone, not even my daughter, cut that bond again. One last task remained before the moment of reckoning. I opened another file, a draft of my will I had prepared with my attorney in Ohio. I had planned to revise it after the wedding, adding Madeline more clearly as a beneficiary. Now, there was no need. I called my attorney, Mr. Jackson. "Evelyn, I thought you'd be at the wedding tonight," he said, surprised. "I'm still here," I replied, "but something has changed. I need to revise my will immediately, at least the draft and email confirmation before Monday." He shifted into professional tone quickly. "All right, tell me what you'd like to update." I spoke firmly. "I want Madeline Carter removed from all inheritance. The house, savings, life insurance, my small share in the laundromat, everything. I want it reassigned to Mark and then, if Mark passes before me, transferred to a charity fund supporting older women in hardship." He paused. "Are you certain, Evelyn? This is a significant decision." "Tonight," I said, "I received the clearest answer about what I mean to her. I'm not punishing her, Mr. Jackson. I'm simply placing her where she's chosen to be, outside the center of my life." He exhaled heavily. "I'll draft the changes and send them to you for review. Come in Monday for final signatures." "Thank you," I said, "and please keep this confidential." "Of course," he replied. "Evelyn, this isn't cruelty. Sometimes protecting yourself is a form of love too, painful as it is." I closed the laptop. The hotel room felt like a temporary fortress, a place where I was gathering the scattered pieces of my dignity and rebuilding them into one final barrier. Mark had watched everything silently. He didn't interrupt, didn't protest. He sat at the edge of the bed, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Mark," I turned to him, "if I go through with this, will you resent me?" He looked at me for a long moment. His tired eyes were sincere. "I've watched you endure more than any woman I know. If tonight is the night you stand up for yourself, I will stand with you. I hurt for her, but I hurt for you far more." I rested my head on his shoulder. "Tonight, Madeline's life will change. And so will ours," Mark murmured. "In a way, we'll both be freed." I opened my laptop again, not to send more messages or make more calls. I went into my storage folder and gathered every piece of evidence: contracts, invoices, bank statements, screenshots of messages, the email confirmation with the hotel, the new will draft. I placed them all into one folder named Truth. I copied it onto a small silver USB drive I always kept in my purse, then uploaded a duplicate to a private email account meant only for backups. If one day I was no longer here, there would still be enough truth to silence any lies. When everything was finally in place, I looked at the clock. 7:50 p.m. Surely by now, Madeline was standing in the ceremony hall, her hand in Andrew's, smiling in front of 300 guests, believing tonight was the most perfect night of her life, believing she had completely removed two poor nobodies from the flawless picture she wanted to present. She didn't know, couldn't even imagine, that every light above her, every piece of music playing, every chair she and her groom sat on, all depended on one phone call from the mother whose photo she had just posted at the entrance with a ban. And tonight, I would make her understand something she had never learned in her entire life. No one can build their happiness on humiliating the person who gave birth to them and raised them without paying a price. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Then I opened them again, staring straight at my phone screen, where Mr. Harris's number still sat in my call history. I didn't call right away. I left a pause for myself to confirm one last time that this wasn't from impulse or anger. This was the decision of a woman pushed to her final limits, who had thought, endured, forgiven far too many times, and was now choosing to stand on her own side. When that pause ended, I knew it was time. I tightened my grip on the phone and waited for the perfect moment to destroy the wedding I had spent my entire life paying for, only to receive the rawest betrayal in return. Chelsea sent the update just as the clock struck 8:10. "They're all seated, Mrs. Carter. The appetizers will be brought out in a few minutes." Her voice was small but full of meaning. I understood. This was the exact right moment. I set the phone down for a moment. Mark was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, silently looking down at the dim parking lot. When I walked toward him, he turned, his eyes heavy but steady. "Evelyn, are you sure?" I didn't answer with words. I simply took his hand. That hand had guided me through so many hardships, but tonight it became the support I needed to walk into the most decisive moment of my life as a mother. I pressed the call button. Mr. Harris picked up immediately, as if he had been waiting for every second. "Mrs. Carter?" I drew a deep breath. "It's time." No questions, just one crisp reply. "Yes, ma'am. We'll proceed immediately." I set the phone down. Inside me, a strange emptiness spread. A feeling like closing a door that had been open for decades, a door I had never believed I would have the courage to shut. Only a few minutes later, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Chelsea texted, "The sound is off. Everyone is confused. The bride is looking around, panicking." I closed my eyes, imagining the scene inside the venue. The main hall of the Linden Garden, once glowing with warm golden lights, soft background music, elegant table settings, was now swallowed by sudden silence. More than 300 guests, business people, the Whitmore family's partners, friends, relatives from far away, all lifted their heads, looking around, not understanding what was happening. Some laughed, thinking it was part of a performance. Others whispered, irritation clearly on their faces. Then the second text arrived. "The decorative lights are off. Only the emergency lights are on. People are standing up, chaotic." I opened my eyes. Mark watched me, his face reflecting the dim light from my phone. "It started," I whispered. In my mind, I pictured the bright lights going out row by row. From the ceiling down the sides of the hall, the sparkling strings of lights, the ones Madeline had said must look cinematic, now nothing more than dark pieces of glass. Under the cold white glow of emergency lighting, everyone's panic was more visible. Unease seeped into every whisper. These guests, so used to polished, high-class events, were now looking at each other with confusion and irritation. Chelsea texted, "The staff have stopped service. They're all standing still on command. No appetizers are going out." I pictured the young waitstaff in their neat black and white uniforms, standing frozen like statues. No smiles, no polite bows, no champagne refills. And in a luxury wedding, that alone was a loud signal that something enormous was happening. An older guest likely lost patience, standing up and shouting, "What is going on? Get the manager here immediately!" Chairs scraped, voices rose, heels clicked on tile, a storm of noise swelling in the hall, all surging toward Madeline, my daughter, standing in the center like someone stripped of her crown in front of everyone. Chelsea's fourth text came, "Madeline is standing in the center, pale. She's asking the staff who authorized this. No one is answering." I could imagine her face. The same daughter who once beamed with joy on her college graduation day, who once ran to hug me when she got her first job. Now trembling, eyes wide with terror. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand, because she believed power and wealth were what controlled the world. She forgot one thing. Tonight, every glass, every rose, every strip of silk was paid for with my money. The fifth message arrived, longer. "Andrew is yelling at the staff. He says he'll call his lawyer. But Manager Harris just walked in. He showed Andrew the contract and pointed at the name, yours." I stared at the screen, unusually calm. Some truths don't require shouting, just a signature. I pictured Andrew grabbing the contract, reading my name on every page, then perhaps looking around, searching for backup from his family. But the truth was too clear, too sharp, leaving no one able to save him from the humiliation spreading across the hall like spilled oil. Then Chelsea sent, "Mrs. Whitmore, she opened your email." I sat upright. My heart beat lightly but steadily, no twisting pain now. Mark leaned toward me, almost holding his breath. Then the final message in that sequence appeared. "She's frozen. Her hands are shaking. Her face is white. People beside her are asking what's wrong." She handed her phone to her husband. He looked at it, then looked at Andrew, like he wants to crush him. I exhaled, a long breath I had been holding for weeks. The Whitmore family, who mocked me, looked down on me, orchestrated my humiliation at the gate, lost their dignity in just a few minutes. I didn't feel triumphant. Truly, I didn't feel joy reading those texts. What rose inside me wasn't arrogant victory, but deep relief. Like finally, the truth had been forced to speak after being buried so long. I imagined Margaret Whitmore standing at her table, hands shaking, reading each invoice, each contract I sent. Every paid by Evelyn Carter, cutting into her pride like cold metal. I imagined Andrew turning to the bride, my daughter, just as stunned. His pride ripped away in front of 300 people. And I knew, at that very moment, the Whitmores finally understood something they never expected. The woman they humiliated was the only reason they had the wedding that was now falling apart before their eyes. Then Chelsea texted a sentence that made my hand pause above the screen. "Madeline is crying. She's asking, who did this?" I stared at the words, my heart tightening. My daughter was crying. That moment didn't make me waver, but it did bring a sharp ache to the part of me that was still a mother. I had given birth to her. I had raised her through the hardest years. And now I was the one pulling the cloth off the truth at the wedding she treated as her life's dream. But I didn't regret it. I had been silent too long. I had let her believe there were no consequences. I had let myself be treated as an extra in the life I built for her. If tonight she had to stand under cold emergency lighting, facing 300 questioning eyes, then that was the only lesson she would listen to. I put the phone down. Mark squeezed my shoulder. "Are you all right?" I nodded, and for the first time my eyes were no longer wet. All right. For the first time. Truly all right. Outside the window, the lights of Ohio shimmered like quiet dots, as if reminding me that life was bigger than the pain Madeline caused. And in that rare moment, I knew. The storm I unleashed wasn't to destroy her. It was to let her see what she had lost by letting arrogance lead her. Tonight the lights at the wedding went out, but the light inside me, for the first time in a long while, turned back on. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, my heart settling like calm water after the strongest wind of my life, when my phone vibrated violently. The screen lit up with the caller's name, Madeline. I stared at it for a long time. Mark stood behind me, his eyes gentle but sad, as if he knew exactly what I was about to face. When I pressed answer, I heard my daughter's ragged breaths, the chaotic noise behind her, people shouting, management being called, chairs scraping. Then Madeline burst into tears, sobbing, Mom, please help me." I closed my eyes, not from pain, but because I realized I had been waiting for this call, not out of satisfaction, but out of closure. "Madeline," I said, my voice strangely calm, "there's nothing to save." It was as if she had been struck in the chest. "What do you mean?" A minute ago, everything was normal. Then suddenly, the lights went off, the staff left, the email came. Everyone is looking at me like you lied to them, I said. Like you made up a story about your in-laws' generosity. Like you turned your own mother into a poor maid to be kept outside the gate. Madeline sniffled, her voice shrinking. "Mom, I didn't think it would end up like this. I just wanted everything to look perfect. The Whitmore family, they have very high standards, and I spoke softly, but not gently. You put their standards above your own family, above your parents, above the mother who kept you alive through the hardest years of your life." Silence, only her quiet sobbing. I continued, "Madeline, do you remember you told me to cut all our relatives because they did nothing for your future? You banned us from the ceremony area to preserve the image. You allowed them to hang a sign banning your own parents at the entrance." "No. Mom, you also said," I emphasized, "that you were ashamed people would know your mother once worked at a laundromat. Do you remember that?" Madeline's breath hitched, like she couldn't get air. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said, "and you never apologized." Behind her voice, I heard someone yank the phone. Andrew's voice exploded, angry and arrogant. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You ruined our wedding, you—" "No," I cut in, my voice calm to the point of being cold. "I only turned off the things I paid for, the things your family took credit for without paying a single cent." "You're insane," Andrew yelled. "You'll pay for this. I'll sue you for causing serious damages." I laughed softly, a thin paper-like sound. It silenced him for several seconds. "Sue me?" I asked. "You're going to sue me because I turned off the sound, the lights, and the service at the wedding I paid for." Do you want to review the contract, Andrew? My name is on every line. I paid every invoice. I have the right to stop everything at any moment. And I spoke slowly. I also have audio files of you bragging to your friends that your family paid for everything. that the bride's side is dirt poor. I heard Andrew choke up, then the sound of him muttering a curse. You will pay for this." "No," I said. "My daughter is the one who will pay, not me." Madeline grabbed the phone back, breathing hard like she had been running, her voice shaking violently. "Mom, please stop. I'm begging you." That plea, if it had been 2 weeks earlier, I might have burst into tears. But now I saw one very clear truth. She only begged when she was exposed, not when she did wrong. "Madeline," I said, my voice lowering, almost a whisper, "today I did not ruin your wedding. You ruined it yourself. You belittled your parents. You deceived your guests. You built your dream on humiliating the people who raised you, and you thought you would never have to pay for it. Mom, please, don't say that. This," I said, "is a lesson about consequences. You can hate me for the rest of your life, but you will never forget tonight." Behind her, I heard hundreds of guests murmuring, people calling for staff, Mrs. Whitmore raising her voice at someone, Andrew slamming his hand on a table. Everything, like the distant echo of a world I had just stepped out of and had no intention of returning to. Madeline sobbed so hard she could barely form words. "I need you. Right now, I don't know what to do." "You did not need me," I said. "When you erased me from your life, when you hung that sign, when you were ashamed of where you came from, so now you must stand on your own feet." "Mom," I closed my eyes and said the final sentence I knew would carve itself into this night like a cut. "I cannot save someone who does not want to save herself." I lowered the phone from my ear. "Mom!" Her voice cracked with panic. "Don't hang up. I'm begging you." I didn't let her finish. I pressed the end call button. The screen returned to silence. But I didn't stop there. I opened settings and blocked all calls and messages from Madeline, from Andrew, and from the entire Whitmore family. When I set the phone down, I felt Mark place his hand on my back. He didn't say anything. He just squeezed my shoulder, a squeeze strong enough to tell me I wasn't alone. That night, for the first time in many years, I pulled the blanket over myself and laid my head on the pillow without feeling my heart sink. I didn't toss and turn, replaying painful words in my head. I didn't think about the sign at the gate. I didn't think about Madeline's face. I didn't think about the chaos at the party. I only thought one thing. At last, I had stepped out of the cycle of endurance that once felt endless, and I slept. A deep, peaceful sleep without dreams, without heaviness. The best sleep I had had in many years. 6 months passed since that night the lights went out. A night I still remember in every detail, not because of pain, but because it marked the moment I walked out of a life I had trapped myself in for far too long. Time didn't blur the memory. Instead, it revealed the truth of everything, especially of people. Rumors about the failed wedding spread faster than anything I had ever seen. In the first weeks, a local paper even ran a mocking piece about a luxurious wedding plunged into darkness, though they didn't know half the truth behind it. Guests traded stories in half-whispered loops, and the Whitmore name, once their badge of honor, started being spoken with disdain. In the local business community, their reputation nearly collapsed. The gossip circled around how they borrowed prestige, showed off, and lived off someone else's money. Andrew's mother, Margaret, who once walked into every event with the arrogance of someone who owned the room, now appeared far less often. And when she did, people said she bowed her head more than she lifted it. I didn't feel triumphant hearing any of this. Every downfall has its own cost, and I never wished for others to pay just so I could be happy. But I understood that some lessons in life are only learned through loss. As for Madeline and Andrew, they were still married. The wedding became a joke, but the marriage license was still valid. Yet their lives were nothing like the luxury they once imagined. The Whitmore family cut off all financial support, blaming the wedding scandal for embarrassing them. Andrew lost some key partners. With his reputation stained, he walked into meetings with a much lower posture than before. No one said it outright, but they understood. A man who cannot stand on his own will never earn real respect. Madeline, from what I heard, struggled to keep even a sliver of her image in her husband's family. She had to start working earlier than she planned. She had to track expenses, measure every part of their budget. No more fancy dinners, no more expensive clothing, no more luxury weekend trips, and no more respect from the Whitmores. The same people who once praised her when she first met Andrew now looked at her like an outsider. They saw her as the faint shadow of a mistake. And Madeline tried to hold herself together, but she grew more worn and frail by the day. One early June afternoon, with summer wind blowing across the porch, I was watering my pots of sunflowers when I heard a car stop at the gate. Mark was in his office. Only I stepped out. A worn sedan door opened, and Madeline got out. She had noticeably lost weight. Her once shiny blonde hair was dry and split, tied in a rush. Her clothes were no longer the elaborate style she used to prefer. Her face carried dark circles, her eyes tired as though she had cried through many nights. She stood at the gate, looking at me like someone staring at a stranger she no longer knew how to approach. "Mom," her voice was hoarse, "can you come outside and talk to me for a moment?" I opened the gate but held my distance, not coldly, but enough for her to know the past could not be erased like chalk. Madeline burst into tears immediately, as if my presence alone unlocked everything she had held back for months. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't take it anymore." She fell to her knees right on the gravel path, burying her face in her hands. "I lost everything. Everything. I have no one to talk to. I have no one on my side anymore. Please, Mom, forgive me. I need you." I leaned down and set my hand lightly on her shoulder, but didn't rush to comfort her. "Madeline," I said slowly, "you didn't lose me. You only lost the right to assume I would endure forever." She looked up, her red eyes filled with hope. "Mom, I'll do anything. I just need you to hold me, just once." My heart ached with the instinct of a mother. I had wilted for years out of fear of losing her, but today I understood something else. Love does not mean allowing someone to hurt you endlessly. Sometimes love means standing far enough away for them to see their own mistakes. "Madeline," I said softly, "forgiveness isn't something people receive by asking. Forgiveness is something they earn through action. I'm not closing the door on you, but I won't open it all the way just because of a tearful apology." She went still. In the past, whenever I spoke gently, Madeline often answered with a pout or an irritated tone, but today she only bowed her head. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll come back when I deserve to." She stood, wiped her tears with her sleeve, and as she walked away, her figure shrinking down the familiar road, she looked like a child realizing for the first time that the world did not revolve around her. 1 month after that, Mark and I sold the business. The laundromat that had been our family's livelihood for 30 years had become a symbol of the life I had stepped out of. We sold it to a sweet young couple who promised to keep the shop's name out of respect for the generations who built it. With the money, we moved into a small home near the beaches of North Carolina. The sound of waves every evening made me feel as though I was getting back breaths that life had taken from me for too long. I met with my lawyer again. This time, not in pain or anger, but clarity. The new will was adjusted. All assets would be transferred to a fund supporting older women seeking independence after leaving toxic families. Not a single dollar would go to Madeline, unless she proved through time and consistent action that she had changed. Mr. Jackson nodded after reading it. Evelyn, this is not the decision of a cold mother. This is the decision of someone who finally knows how to love in the right way. I knew he was right. The most surprising part was what happened after everything fell apart. My family, the same people Madeline erased from her guest list, returned to me more than ever. Linda called me every week. The little nieces and nephews sent hand-drawn letters of the ocean, asking when they could visit. Old friends stopped by, filling the house with laughter. And I realized that the people who truly loved me had never left. I had simply been blinded by the love I poured into a child who didn't value it. One evening, Mark and I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink into the sea, the deep orange fading into soft purple. Mark said, "Do you feel lighter now?" I nodded. Not just lighter, I feel free. For the first time in years. Free from expectations, free from the fear of losing my child, free from feeling I had to be endlessly good just to be loved, free to live the life I spent too many years building for others. And as the ocean breeze brushed past me, I closed my eyes and smiled, not because the past was beautiful, but because I knew I had stepped into the most beautiful part of my own life. From the porch overlooking the sea each evening, I realize life has moments that force us to look deeply at ourselves. I once believed that if I loved my child unconditionally, every wound could be forgiven. But love without respect is just a shackle wrapped in pretty paper. It makes us forget ourselves, shrink ourselves, sacrifice until we break, and still never be enough. I spent too many years living that way. Now looking back, I understand that leaving someone you love is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is the only way to save yourself from drowning. It hurts, yes, but not every pain is bad. Some pain opens a door. And for me, that door was the night the wedding lights went out. Since the day Madeline came begging for forgiveness and then quietly left, I haven't received another call or message. But strangely, my heart no longer waits, no longer hopes for an explanation, no longer hopes for anything that might drag me back into the fragile woman I used to be. Some relationships can only heal when both sides try. If only one side looks back, apologizes, or repairs. That is not family. That is a spiral of exhaustion. I do not hate Madeline. Even though I close the door, my heart still hopes that someday, not through tears or apologies, but through long-term change and real actions, she will show me she's grown. But if that day never comes, I will not hurt anymore. I have already saved myself. Now every morning I walk along the beach, picking up a few shells still wet from the tide, listening to the waves like a lullaby from a new life. In the afternoon, I sit at the nearby community center, talking with older women trapped in toxic families, women who were once versions of me. I listen to them cry, then quietly offer them the courage I paid a very high price to find. I realized that the most meaningful thing in my life wasn't paying for a wedding or putting my child through college, but helping other women see their worth. The thing I once desperately wished someone would help me see. Anyone who writes, leaves a message, or asks me to share my story, I read everything. Each note reminds me I am not alone, and none of us ever truly are. Family. I learned this far too late, but just in time, is not necessarily made of blood. Family is the people who stay when you fall. Family is the ones who never make you feel small. Family is the ones who speak your name with kindness, not contempt. And now, as you sit somewhere listening to this story, I want to ask you something sincere. Where are you listening from? And have you ever felt overlooked by your own family or had to stand up to protect your dignity? If you have, I hope you leave a few words in the comments, not for me, but for the other women who read them, the ones still suffering silently so they know they are not alone. Thank you, truly thank you, for being here, for listening to the journey of an ordinary mother like me. Every minute you spend with this story matters to me more than you can imagine. And if you want to continue walking with me with stories about the quiet strength of middle-aged and older women, then please follow the channel and leave a like. It isn't an obligation. It's simply a way of saying you're still here and that stories of healing like this still have a place in your heart. Thank you for staying with me to the end. I wish you peace, and I hope you too will find your own freedom.